You have never seen reality, not once, and everything you trust as seeing is a controlled limitation you were born into. Imagine a sealed room, no windows, no exit, only a weak candle trembling in the center, its light barely reaching the edges, its shadows stretching and distorting whatever stands within its narrow circle, and within that dim perimeter you build your entire sense of truth, naming shapes, assigning meaning, forming attachments, fearing silhouettes that were never solid to begin with, and calling that fragment the world. Now remove yourself from the comfort of that illusion for a second. Outside that room, there is no candle. There is a sun at its peak, a sky too vast to be framed, oceans that do not end where your eyes expect them to, mountains that break your sense of scale, and wavelengths of color your brain has never processed because it lacks the structure to translate them into experience. And yet you remain inside, convinced that shadows are final, that the flicker is complete, that nothing exists beyond what your senses confirm. This is not a metaphor. This is your operating condition. Modern physics did not invent this idea. It confirmed it. The visible spectrum your eyes can detect occupies less than 1% of the electromagnetic field that surrounds you at all times, a narrow band carved out between infrared and ultraviolet. While radio waves pass through your body, gamma radiation crosses space from collapsing stars, and dark energy continues expanding the universe without ever registering in your perception. The limitation is not out there. It is built into you. Mystery traditions understood this long before instrumentation could measure it. The initiates of ancient Egypt, the philosophers of Greece, did not describe blindness as ignorance of facts, but as confinement within a sensory system that mistakes its limits for reality itself. And that confusion is still active in you now, reinforced by habit, by culture, by the constant feedback loop of what can be touched, weighed, and confirmed. You move through a world you believe is solid, stable, and external, yet what you call matter is mostly empty space, structured by fields of energy, a thin surface of interaction that your nervous system translates into objects so you can function without collapsing under complexity. And that translation is useful, but it is not truth. This is where most people stop. You won't. This work is not designed to help you feel better inside the room. It is not another system to rearrange your thoughts, decorate your beliefs, or optimize your reactions within a structure that remains fundamentally misunderstood. We are not adjusting the candle. We are removing the walls. For centuries, human perception has narrowed, not expanded. As attention shifted toward analysis, measurement, and linear reasoning, tools that are powerful but incomplete, tools that dissect but cannot perceive beyond their own parameters. And in that shift, something essential was neglected: the capacity to perceive without relying on the physical interface. You were trained to believe you are a body that produces consciousness, when in reality, what you call you is a field of awareness temporarily anchored to a biological system, using it as an instrument, and like any instrument, it can only register within a defined range, leaving everything outside that range unprocessed, not absent, just inaccessible. There is a sensory layer in you that has not disappeared, only remained unused. Call it the inner eye if you need a term, but understand this is not metaphorical language. It refers to a mode of perception that does not depend on the retina, that does not translate through light, that does not require external reflection to construct an image. And because it has not been engaged, it has been dismissed, reduced to intuition, imagination, or anomaly. That dismissal is the real blindness. Consider this. Your brain already constructs reality by filtering, compressing, and projecting signals into a coherent model, which means what you experience is not direct contact with the world, but a processed output. And if the system can construct one version of reality based on limited input, it can also construct a broader version when given access to a wider range of signals. The question is not whether more exists, it is whether you are equipped and willing to perceive it. From this point forward, we are not operating within psychology or motivation. Those frameworks remain inside the room. We are moving into structure, into how perception itself is built, into how energy organizes into form, into how awareness interfaces with what you have been taught to ignore. We will examine the architecture of what surrounds you, not as abstraction, but as system, fields, frequencies, patterns of coherence that exist whether you acknowledge them or not, and we will approach them without belief, because belief is a substitute for direct observation. You are not being asked to accept anything. You are being asked to test it. What you're about to hear may conflict with your current logic, not because it is irrational, but because your logic was trained within a limited dataset, and any system will reject inputs that exceed its calibration. Just as a device built to detect visible light cannot suddenly interpret radio frequencies without modification, what you call impossible is often just unprocessed. A man in the 12th century would classify a modern device as magic, not because it defies reality, but because it operates on principles outside his model, and you are not exempt from that same limitation. You are simply positioned at a different point on the curve. So adjust your position. Stop studying the shadows as if they are final. Turn your attention to the source that makes them possible. The problem is not that you see too little. It is that you trust what little you see as complete. That error ends here. The correction begins now. You will not need your eyes for what comes next. Chapter 1. The library of the ether empty space is not empty. And if that statement feels abstract to you, it only proves how effectively your perception has been trained to ignore what sustains everything you experience. Look at the distance between stars, or more simply, the space between objects in the room you are in right now, and notice how quickly your mind labels it as nothing, as absence, as a gap that carries no meaning, when in fact that gap is the most active layer of reality, the medium in which everything is recorded, transmitted, and preserved without loss. What you call emptiness is not a void, it is density beyond your detection. Ancient traditions did not treat this as philosophy, but as structure. The rishis named it akasha, primordial space, not as emptiness, but as the base layer from which all of form emerges and into which all events are inscribed. Medieval alchemists called it ether, not as myth, but as a working assumption, that no wave, no signal, no pattern exists without a medium. Modern physics, stripped of symbolism, approaches the same conclusion under different terminology: the zero-point field, the quantum vacuum, terms that sound sterile, but point to the same underlying fact. What appears empty is saturated with potential and information. The name is irrelevant. The function is not. You have been conditioned to believe that reality consists of objects separated by nothing, when the opposite is closer to the truth. Objects are temporary disturbances within a continuous field that connects everything to everything else, and what you ignore between them is precisely what allows interaction, memory, and continuity to exist. That in-between is the system. Every thought you generate is not confined to your skull, it is a patterned disturbance in that field. Every emotional surge is not internal. It is a wave propagated outward, encoded into the medium, and retained without decay because the field itself does not dissipate information in the way your sensory system does. What you forget is not erased. It is simply no longer accessible to your current interface. Oblivion is not a property of the universe. It is a limitation of recall. This is not speculation. Even within measurable physics, information is treated as conserved, transformed, redistributed, but not destroyed. Extend that principle beyond what your instruments can currently resolve, and the implication becomes difficult to ignore. The universe functions less like a collection of objects and more like a recording system that does not overwrite, a system that never deletes. Before atoms assembled into stars, before biological structures emerged, before your body formed, the field was already present. Not as an empty stage, but as the substrate in which all subsequent structure would be organized. You are not placed into reality, you are formed within it, shaped by the same field you continue to interact with every second. Yet you operate as if disconnected. This disconnect is artificial. Visualize a continuous web, not metaphorically, but as a structural model, extending through and within all things, including what you define as solid matter, penetrating even the space inside atoms where classical models describe emptiness, and understand that this web is not passive. It transmits, it stores, it reflects. When you think, you are not observing the web, you are modifying it. A single thought, especially one charged with emotion, behaves like an impulse introduced into a still medium, generating a wave that propagates outward without a clear boundary. And because the medium offers no friction in the conventional sense, The wave does not simply stop. It disperses, overlaps, interferes, but remains part of the total informational structure. Scaled across billions of minds across centuries, the field becomes an archive, not symbolic, not moral, but functional. A distributed memory. This reframes what you consider private. If the medium is continuous, and if every signal introduced into it persists, then your thoughts are not sealed events. They are broadcasts, varying in intensity, interacting with other signals, contributing to a larger pattern that can, under certain conditions, be accessed, interpreted, or re-expressed. You have already experienced fragments of this without labeling it correctly. You think of someone unexpectedly, and they contact you. You dismiss it as coincidence because your noddle cannot account for non-local interaction. Yet the mechanism does not require proximity in the way your senses do. It requires resonance. A sufficiently strong or coherent signal in one node of the system influences another, not through linear transmission, but through shared participation in the same field. The effect appears immediate because the separation was never real at the level where the interaction occurs. What you call telepathy is not an anomaly. It is an underdeveloped use of a standard channel. Language in that context becomes secondary, a compensatory system developed when direct signal recognition weakens, slower, less precise, but easier to control. You rely on it because you no longer trust what arrives without it. This has consequences. If your outputs are persistent, then your mental activity is not neutral. It contributes to the overall state of the field. Extended patterns of fear, hostility, and fragmentation do not remain isolated. They accumulate, reinforce similar patterns, and can reach thresholds where they manifest collectively as events you later describe as external. You attribute causes to visible triggers. You ignore the buildup. Conflict, at scale, rarely begins where it becomes visible. It emerges from sustained patterns that were never addressed at the level where they were generated. This is not moral language. It is system behavior. Now consider the opposite, instances of sudden clarity, solutions that appear without step-by-step derivation. Insights that arrive complete are often described as creativity or intuition, but the pattern does not align with generation. It aligns with retrieval. Historical accounts are consistent on this point. Complex compositions, designs, or formulations are perceived in finished form and then translated into physical expression. The common factor is not effort. It is access. If the field contains structured information, and if the mind can, under certain conditions, align with specific patterns within it, then what you call genius is not the production of new content, but the ability to receive and decode what is already organized beyond your current awareness. The constraint is not availability. It is tuning. Not all regions of this field are equivalent. Variations in coherence, density, and pattern organization create layers, zones where certain types of signals dominate. Lower coherence regions are saturated with unstable, repetitive, or fragmented patterns. Higher coherence regions exhibit order, consistency, and integrated structures. Your internal state determines which region you interact with. This is not abstract. It is operational. If your system is dominated by noise, reactivity, agitation, uncontrolled input, you remain coupled to low coherence patterns. If your system stabilizes, reduced internal fluctuation, increased clarity, you gain access to higher coherence structures. The transition is not granted, it is matched. Access is conditional. This also explains resistance. Attempts to extract information for control, advantage, or intrusion often fail, not because access is arbitrarily denied, but because the system enforces alignment. Mismatch results in interference, confusion, distortion, or absence of signal. You interpret that as blockage. It is filtration, a security mechanism based on compatibility. Time within this framework requires adjustment. If the field stores information without linear degradation, then what you label as past events are not eliminated. They are indexed. Future states, as probability structures, also exist as patterns, less stable but still present. From within a linear perception, you experience sequence. From the field perspective, sequence is a path through a structure that already contains multiple configurations. You move through it. You do not create it from nothing. This is why anticipation sometimes precedes evidence, and why memory occasionally extends beyond what has been directly experienced. The distinction between recalling and projecting becomes less rigid when both operate on the same substrate. However, probability is not permanence. Patterns can be reinforced, altered, or redirected depending on new inputs introduced into the system, which is where agency remains relevant. You are not fixed within a single trajectory. You are interacting with a field that responds to modification. This becomes practical at the level of internal records. Events you classify as past are stored not only as factual sequences but as energetic configurations, patterns that continue to influence current behavior through resonance. Revisiting such a pattern is not an act of imagination, it is a re-engagement with an existing structure. Introducing a new input, interpretation, response, stabilization, modifies the pattern, which in turn alters its influence on your present state. You do not change what happened, you change what continues. That distinction matters. Access does not require elaborate procedures. It requires two conditions that are rarely maintained: reduction of internal noise and precision of inquiry. Without them, the signal remains below your detection threshold or is overwritten by your own output. Silence is not absence of thought. It is reduction of interference. A clear question is not a vague request for outcome. It is a defined probe into structure. What is this pattern? Where does it originate? How is it maintained? Once introduced, the system responds, not always verbally, often through compressed representations. An image, a sudden certainty, an alignment of external events that reflect the answer. The response arrives before your analytical layer attempts to reconstruct it. If you override it, you default to existing data. The first signal is rarely the loudest. It is the least distorted. Everything described here operates whether you acknowledge it or not. The field does not require your belief to function. Your participation is continuous. The only variable is whether you remain limited to a narrow bandwidth of interaction or begin to recognize the structure you are already embedded in. The library is not elsewhere. You are inside it. Chapter 2. The Geometry of God. What you call reality is not built from matter. It is built from pattern, and until you see the pattern, you are not actually seeing anything. Look closely, not with curiosity, but with precision. A sunflower does not arrange its seeds randomly. A shell does not spiral by accident. Your fingerprints are not decorative. The galaxy does not twist without instruction. At every scale, from the microscopic to the astronomical, the same structures repeat, not approximately, but with mathematical consistency that does not tolerate improvisation. Chaos is not the absence of order. It is order you cannot decode. Your physical eye registers diversity, millions of shapes, textures, forms that seem disconnected, unrelated, scattered across existence. But the moment perception sharpens beyond surface recognition, a different layer appears. Repetition, symmetry, proportion, recurrence. Not similarity. Identity expressed through variation. This is not aesthetic, it is structural. Plato was not speculating when he said reality is written in geometry. Galileo did not exaggerate when he described the universe as a mathematical text. They were identifying the only language that does not distort under interpretation. Geometry does not persuade. It defines. You have been taught to read the world as objects. The system is written in relationships. Behind every leaf, every orbit, every cellular division, there is a framework, an invisible scaffolding that determines how matter organizes, how energy stabilizes, how form persists without collapsing into randomness. Matter does not invent structure. It follows it. Form is the consequence. Geometry is the cause. This is where perception shifts from observation to decoding. The base unit is not complexity. It is simplicity. Before any elaborate structure emerges, there is a single condition: unity. Represented not metaphorically but geometrically as a sphere, a form with no edges, no preferred direction, no asymmetry, every point equidistant from the center. It contains no bias, no differentiation. It is complete but inactive. A perfect system that produces nothing. Creation requires disturbance. The center moves, not randomly, precisely. It extends to the boundary of its own field and generates a second sphere, identical in dimension, intersecting the first. The result is not just overlap. It is interference, a region where two systems interact and produce a new structure that did not exist in isolation. This intersection is not decorative, it is functional. The shape that emerges, the vesica piscis, is a threshold, a zone where separation begins to generate relationship. It is the first instance where unity divides without fragmenting, where one becomes two without losing coherence. From this interaction, all proportional systems derive. Continue the process. Rotation, replication at points of intersection, and patterns begin to stabilize. Not arbitrarily, but according to strict spatial relationships. 7 spheres form a configuration that mirrors early biological division. Extend further, and the pattern becomes what is known as the flower of life. Not a symbol, but a map. A map of how structure builds itself. This pattern appears across civilizations not because of cultural exchange, but because it is embedded in the fabric of formation. It is not discovered, it is recognized. Connect the nodes of this pattern, and another layer appears. A geometric network containing within it the only 5 perfectly symmetrical 3-dimensional forms that can exist. These are not abstract shapes. They are the stable solutions to spatial organization under constraint. The Platonic solids each represents a mode of structure, not element as substance, but element as behavior. Tetrahedral patterns correspond to expansion and intensity, what you interpret as heat or activity. Cubic structures stabilize resistance, solidity, persistence. Octahedral configurations balance distribution, exchange. Octosahedral forms flow, adaptability, continuity. And the dodecahedron, rare, complex, encodes integration, coherence across systems. These are not symbolic associations, they are functional mappings. Your body is not exempt from this. At the cellular level, organization follows geometric constraints. Molecular bonds form angles, not randomly but according to stability conditions. Distort those conditions, and function degrades, not because of moral failure, but because structure loses coherence. What you call illness often begins as pattern disruption. Introduce persistent noise, stress, incoherent signaling, sustained imbalance, and the system no longer maintains its original configuration. Cells begin to behave independently, not in coordination. Growth loses proportion. Regulation fails. This is not metaphor, it is system breakdown. Restoration, therefore, is not simply chemical, it is structural. Reintroduce coherence and the system reorganizes toward stability. This is why consistent patterns, sound frequencies, repeated forms, stable fields can influence biological systems. Not through belief, but through resonance. A stable pattern forces alignment. Now shift from structure to proportion. There is a ratio that appears wherever growth occurs without distortion. Not approximate. Precise. A relationship where the whole relates to the larger part in the same way the larger part relates to the smaller. This ratio, approximately 1.618, is not imposed. It emerges. Where it appears, systems scale without losing coherence. Measure segments of the human body and the ratio repeats. Observe plant growth and the arrangement follows it. Spiral structures, hurricanes, galaxies, shells approximate it. Not perfectly but progressively. This is not coincidence. It is convergence. Systems that grow efficiently under constraint tend toward this proportion because it allows expansion without collapse, complexity without fragmentation. It is not aesthetic preference. It is optimization. Deviation from it introduces tension. Modern structures ignore this entirely. Environments built without proportional coherence often produce measurable psychological effects, discomfort, fatigue, disorientation. Not because of subjective bias, but because the system interacting with them is calibrated differently. You are built for proportion. Distortion registers as stress. Now consider movement. Growth does not occur in straight lines. Linear paths connect points. They do not generate structure. Natural systems evolve through curvature, specifically spiral progression, a form that allows expansion while maintaining proportional integrity at every stage. This is not limited to physical systems. Information, energy, even behavioral patterns follow similar trajectories, revisiting previous states at higher complexity, not repeating, but refining. What feels like recurrence is progression along a spiral, not a loop. You do not return to the same point. You approach it differently. Your body reflects this. Circulation does not move linearly, it vortices. Neural signaling distributes across networks, not straight channels. Even your posture, aligned or collapsed, affects how efficiently signals propagate through the system. Geometry is not external, it is embodied. Misalignment is not abstract, it reduces efficiency. Now extend this into construction, not of objects, but of outcomes. Before any physical result appears, a pattern must stabilize. A consistent configuration of intention, attention, and repetition forms a structure that precedes manifestation. If that structure is unstable, contradictory signals, inconsistent input, the outcome does not consolidate. There is no form to fill. A coherent pattern, maintained without interruption, creates a template. Matter follows the template because it is the path of least resistance within the system. This is not belief, it is constraint resolution. Finally, consider integration. A system that is internally consistent, no conflicting signals, no structural gaps, becomes resistant to external disruption. Not invulnerable, but stable. Fragmented systems, by contrast, are easily influenced because they lack coherence. Integrity is not moral language, it is geometric. A complete structure has no entry points for distortion. All of this leads to a single correction. You do not live in a world of things. You live in a field of relationships structured by geometry, governed by proportion, evolving through patterned transformation. Until you perceive that layer, you remain at the surface, reacting to outcomes without understanding the system that produces them. Once you see the pattern, the surface loses authority, and what you thought was reality becomes the visible trace of something far more precise. Chapter 3. The Silent Symphony. You are not made of flesh first. You are made of vibration, and what you call body is only what happens when that vibration slows down enough to be touched. Test it, not by belief, but by attention. Sit still and listen, not casually, but deliberately, and notice how quickly your mind tries to label sound as background, as irrelevant, as noise, when in fact that background is the only constant layer of reality that never stops moving. Now push the idea further. If your hearing were expanded beyond its biological limits, you would not enter silence. You would enter overload. Atomic motion, electromagnetic oscillations, planetary rotations, solar emissions, all of it producing frequency, all of it interacting, all of it continuous. What you call quiet is simply a bandwidth failure. Silence is not real. It is filtered. In Chapter 1, you saw that nothing disappears. It is only lost to your interface. In Chapter 2, you saw that structure exists beneath appearance. Now the missing piece becomes visible. Structure does not hold itself. It is maintained by vibration. Geometry is frozen movement. Take a simple example. A metal plate, fine sand scattered across it, no pattern, no order. Introduce a tone, just one, and instantly the sand reorganizes into precise shapes. Circles, hexagons, symmetrical patterns that did not exist seconds before. Change the tone, and the pattern shifts. Stop the tone, and the structure collapses. This is not theory. It is observable physics. The implication is direct. Matter does not organize itself. It is organized by frequency. What you saw in the previous chapter, the flower-like patterns, the repeating structures, is not static architecture. It is the visible trace of standing waves. Remove the vibration, and the geometry disappears. So the question becomes unavoidable. If vibration builds form, what happens when vibration becomes incoherent? Your body answers that question every day. Cells are not rigid units. They are dynamic systems held together by signaling patterns. When those patterns remain stable, the system functions. When they distort, through stress, inconsistency, overload, the structure loses coherence. Not instantly, but progressively. You call that illness. It does not begin in the visible layer. It begins in the pattern. Restore the pattern, and the system reorganizes. This is why repetition matters, why stable inputs produce stable outputs, why certain environments exhaust you while others restore you without explanation. You are not reacting psychologically, you are responding physically to frequency. Now shift from observation to mechanism. At the most fundamental level, what you call particles are not objects, they are oscillations. String theory proposes this explicitly. Different vibrations produce different particles. Whether or not the model is complete, the principle holds. Change the oscillation and you change the form. Lead and gold are not fundamentally different substances. They are different configurations. Alter the configuration and the identity changes. This is why ancient texts framed creation as sound, not as poetry, but as process. A frequency introduced into a field produces structure. That is creation. Not assembly, not construction, modulation. Across civilizations, the same principle appears with different names. The Hindus called it Om, the base tone of existence. Greek philosophy described it as logos, the ordering principle. Egyptian traditions attributed creation to articulated sound. These are not myths describing a voice. They are attempts to describe a frequency event. You are not separate from that process. Your voice is not passive, it is generative. Every time you speak, you produce a pressure wave that interacts with the environment. Not metaphorically, physically. The phrase "I create as I speak" is not mystical, it is descriptive. Sound alters structure. The question is not whether your words matter, it is whether you understand how they operate. Now consider resonance. Place two identical tuning forks near each other. Strike one, and the other begins to vibrate without contact. Not because of intention, but because of frequency alignment. Energy transfers when patterns match. You operate under the same principle. Enter a space filled with tension, and your system adjusts. Not by choice, by resonance. Spend time with someone whose internal state is unstable, and your own system compensates, trying to match or resist. Both require energy. This is why certain interactions drain you, not emotionally, structurally. The opposite is also true. Enter a coherent environment, music, rhythm, focused attention, and your system aligns upward. Not because you decided to feel better, but because the dominant pattern is more stable than your own. You synchronize. This is not subjective. It is mechanical. Now extend that to your daily input. Everything you hear, every repeated phrase, every sound pattern, internal or external, contributes to the configuration you stabilize over time. Random input produces unstable structure. Coherent input produces order. You are constantly being tuned. The only question is, by what? Modern environments are saturated with incoherent signals, fragmented audio, constant interruptions, overlapping frequencies that never resolve into stable patterns. This is not neutral. It prevents your system from stabilizing long enough to detect subtle signals. Noise is not harmless. It is interference. This is why ancient practices insisted on controlled sound, chants, repeated tonal patterns, structured breathing. Not for belief, but for recalibration. Repetition of a stable frequency reorganizes internal chaos the same way a constant tone reorganizes sand into symmetry. You are not relaxing, you are retuning. Reduce the noise and something else becomes detectable. Not imagination, not fantasy, but low-amplitude signals that were always present but masked. The threshold drops and new layers emerge. This is where silence becomes functional. Not absence of sound, but reduction of interference. When external noise drops and internal dialogue stabilizes, your system becomes sensitive enough to register patterns it previously ignored. A faint internal tone, a consistent background frequency. Not imposed, detected. Some traditions called it the inner sound current. Neuroscience would describe it as baseline neural oscillation becoming perceptible. The label is irrelevant. The system was always active. You were not calibrated to perceive it. Now connect this back to structure. In Chapter 2, geometry defined the framework. Here, vibration defines the activation. Without frequency, geometry remains potential. Without geometry, frequency disperses. Together, they produce stable reality. You cannot separate them. Now consider behavior. If your internal state is inconsistent, contradictory signals, unstable patterns, your output fragments. Words lose effect. Actions lose direction. The system cannot stabilize because the input is not coherent. Consistency is not discipline. It is structural integrity. Align input and output and the pattern strengthens. Repeat it and it stabilizes. Maintain it and it begins to influence external conditions, not by force but by alignment with existing structures. This is not motivation. It is pattern reinforcement. Now take it one level further. If everything is vibration, then what you call spiritual growth is not movement in space. It is adjustment in frequency. Higher states are not locations. They are faster, more coherent patterns that your current system may not yet sustain. You do not go somewhere else. You tune differently. Finally, return to the initial assumption. You believed you were solid. That sound was secondary. That silence was empty. All incorrect. You are a configuration of vibration held in temporary stability, shaped by the frequencies you interact with, reinforced by the patterns you repeat, and altered continuously whether you notice it or not. The system is already running. You are already participating. The only variable left is control. Are you producing your own signal, or are you being tuned by everything around you? Chapter 4. The Night Traveler. Sleep is not rest. It is rehearsal for death. And you have been passing through it every night without understanding what is actually happening. Every night you disappear completely. Your body shuts down. Your muscles are disabled, your senses collapse inward, and yet you wake up calling that process nothing. As if a third of your existence dissolves into darkness without consequence. As if hours of experience are simply erased, instead of occurring beyond your ability to recall them. That assumption is not just inaccurate, it blinds you to the most repeated and most accessible transformation in your entire life. Sleep is the little brother of death. The Sufi tradition did not speak in metaphor for comfort, but in observation of process, because every night you undergo a temporary version of the same event that one day will become permanent, except that now the system reconnects you in the morning, and you call it waking up. The wise man does not waste that interval. He does not abandon consciousness for 8 hours and call it recovery. He uses that interval to travel, to learn, to operate in a layer of reality that does not depend on the physical body, and to visit what ancient traditions described as the true home, the state that remains when the biological system is no longer available. Watch the transition closely because it happens the same way every time. You look at the clock, you prepare for sleep, you lie down, and within minutes your breathing becomes rhythmic, your heart rate drops, and your brain shifts from fast, scattered beta activity into slower patterns. From the perspective of materialistic science, your consciousness fades so the body can repair itself, and the process is framed as shutdown. But at the exact same moment, another process begins. Your body enters paralysis, REM atonia, so it cannot move. And this is not a malfunction, but a safety mechanism, because without it, you would physically act out internal signals and injure yourself. And precisely at that threshold, a structural shift occurs, not gradual, not symbolic, but discrete. A click, an exact copy of your form, made not of dense matter but of subtle, responsive energy, detaches from the physical system, rises slightly above it, rotates, and moves through what your waking mind insists is solid structure, passing through the ceiling, entering a layer that exists in the same space but under different conditions. This is not imagination. Robert Monroe described it with unusual precision. This is not a dream. Dreams are blurry. This is more real than waking life. His reports were consistent across repeated experiences. Color sharper, perception stable, thought immediate, environment responsive without delay. And this distinction is critical because it separates random mental activity from structured interaction. You leave your body every night. You simply do it without awareness, like someone walking in a sleep state, drifting through a space they cannot interpret, generating fragmented experiences, and returning when the physical system reasserts control, waking up with only vague impressions and calling them dreams. It was not a dream. It was a poorly recorded journey. Now understand the structure behind it, because without structure, there is no control. You are not a single body containing a soul like a battery inside a device. You are a layered system, closer to a nested architecture than a container, where each layer operates under different rules while remaining connected. The physical body is the hardware, dense, slow, constrained by inertia. The energetic layer maintains biological function, the flow, the charge, the regulation. And the astral body is the operating layer that carries perception when the physical system is offline. This astral structure has a human form only because your mind expects continuity, but it is infinitely plastic, not governed by gravity, not slowed by inertia, not damaged by impact. If force is applied, it passes through like smoke, because the interaction rules are different. The connection between these layers remains constant. Ancient texts described it as the silver cord. Ecclesiastes 12:6 refers to it, not as a literal string, but as a continuous energetic coupling linking the physical system to the astral system, transmitting energy, maintaining synchronization, and ensuring return. As long as that link remains intact, separation is temporary. Astral travel is extension. Death is the irreversible severing of that link. Now consider the environment you enter, because misunderstanding this is where most confusion begins. The astral plane is not a distant location. It is not above you or somewhere in the sky. It is here, occupying the same coordinates as your room, but operating at a different frequency, meaning you do not travel across space. You shift the parameters of perception. And within that layer, the rules of physics are radically different. In the physical world, inertia exists. Time delays exist. Effort is required to produce structure. If you want to build a house, you need materials, time, and sustained action. In the astral plane, there is no delay. Thought becomes immediate structure. If you think of a house, it appears, not metaphorically, but as an organized form made of subtle matter shaped by your signal. If you think of a location, you are there instantly, because there is no travel, only repositioning of awareness. And if you generate fear, that fear organizes the environment into something that reflects it. This explains nightmares with precision. In the physical world, fear produces internal discomfort, but does not alter external structure. In the astral layer, fear is a signal that the system renders immediately, producing forms that appear external, but originate from your own output. You are not being attacked, you are interacting with what you generated. This leads to the first requirement for the night traveler, and it is not technique, it is control. Emotional stability is not optional. If you enter that state with fear, anger, or uncontrolled impulse, you create an environment that reflects those signals instantly, trapping you in feedback loops that feel external but are internally generated. If you enter with clarity, calm, and curiosity, the environment stabilizes and becomes navigable. Now understand that this environment is not uniform. It is stratified. Lower density zones exist where unstable patterns accumulate: fear, addiction, aggression, producing a dense, chaotic layer that resembles what older traditions described as hell, not as punishment, but as consequence of accumulated incoherence. Middle layers reflect familiar structures, daily environments, recognizable forms, but with inconsistencies that reveal the shift in rules. Higher layers are coherent, ordered, stable. Environments where distortion is minimal and information is structured. You do not choose where you go. You match it. Your internal frequency determines your position. Now clarify a confusion that must be removed. A lucid dream is a closed system, generated entirely by your subconscious, fully controllable, but limited to your own stored data. Astral projection is an open system. You leave the private bubble and enter a shared layer where not everything responds to your will because it exists independently of you. The entry point for both is identical. Recognition. Realizing that you are no longer operating in the physical system. Most people fail to recognize this moment and remain passive, carried by whatever pattern dominates their internal state. Now consider the threshold again, because this is where most attempts fail. At the point of conscious exit, many experience sleep paralysis, waking up unable to move, feeling pressure on the chest, hearing intense electrical buzzing, sensing a presence in the room. The instinct is immediate fear. I'm dying. I'm being attacked. That reaction aborts the process, because what is happening is not danger. The paralysis is the safety mechanism preventing physical movement. The buzzing is the frequency shift of the brain transitioning states. The presence is often your own perception splitting across layers, or a guide signal you do not yet understand. The correct response is not resistance. It is surrender. Relax into the state. Do not fight the paralysis. Allow the vibration to stabilize. Apply intention. Movement upward, outward, and the transition completes. There is a moment of release, then silence, and you are no longer inside the physical system. You are out. You can look back and see the body. Now, movement changes. You do not walk. You align. You focus on a destination and allow the environment to reorganize. Doubt introduces resistance. Belief in physical limitation creates friction, and clarity removes both. Walls are not barriers. They are patterns. Approach, maintain confidence, and pass through. If you hesitate, you reinforce the illusion of solidity and remain constrained. The system reflects your assumptions. Now consider purpose, because without purpose, this state becomes distraction. Most people, even if aware, waste the opportunity, experimenting, reacting, drifting without direction. The initiate does not. Before sleep, intention is set with precision. Tonight I want to understand this. Tonight I want to see this. Tonight I want to meet this. Without instruction, the system defaults to randomness. With instruction, it organizes response. Reports across traditions describe structured environments, temples, schools, repositories of knowledge, where information is transmitted directly, not through linear explanation, but as compressed understanding. 1 hour in that state can produce insight that would take years through conventional study. Access is not granted arbitrarily. It is matched through coherence. Now consider contact with those who have left the physical system. The astral plane is where they operate, not as static entities, but as active participants. They appear younger, stable, coherent, communicating directly without distortion, and interaction is clear, not symbolic. You can distinguish it. A dream is unstable and fragmented. A real encounter is consistent, detailed, and leaves a lasting clarity. Now address fear again, because it remains the primary barrier: possession, being trapped, not returning. These are myths. As long as the physical system remains viable, reconnection is automatic through the existing link. The only real risks are internal: fear, instability, obsession that pulls attention away from physical life. This is not an escape from reality. It is an extension of it. There is also an ethical dimension. Intent is visible in this system. If you enter with manipulation, intrusion, or exploitation, you align with lower density structures and experience the consequences immediately. If you enter with clarity, learning, and stability, access expands naturally. The system does not judge, it responds. Finally, understand the reason this matters beyond curiosity. One day, the separation will not reverse. The silver cord will disconnect. The physical system will stop. For someone unprepared, that moment is confusion, resistance, fragmentation. For the one who has practiced, it is recognition. Familiar, procedural. You have done it thousands of times. Sleep is not rest, it is training for the final transition. And the only question that remains is whether, when that moment arrives, you know how to move. Chapter 5. The 7 Veils. The face you see in the mirror is not you. It is only the outermost layer of a much larger structure, the heaviest suit in a nested system of bodies that operate at different densities, on different frequencies, and under different laws. Stand in front of a mirror and look carefully. You see skin, hair, eyes, posture, weight, clothes, a solid figure occupying measurable space. And because it responds when you move, because it suffers when cut and ages when time passes, you say, "This is me." The soul's eye corrects that error immediately. That is not you. That is only the terminal surface where deeper causes become visible. Man is not a body that has a soul. Man is a spirit that has wrapped itself in layers of matter of different density so it can interact with worlds of different vibration. That is the real model. Ancient systems described it again and again with different vocabularies because the underlying structure kept returning. Annie Besant described the human being as an onion of light, layer after layer, sheet after sheath, and at the center, the paradox, nothing that can be grasped as an object and everything that can be recognized as being. The Hindu tradition speaks of koshas, sheaths. Theosophy describes a septenary constitution. Egyptian initiatory systems spoke of multiple vehicles. Paul, in 1 Corinthians 15:40-44, draws the same distinction with sharp clarity. There are celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies. There is a natural body, and there is a spiritual body. Different traditions, same anatomy. You are not a monolith. You are a spectrum. Just as white light passes through a prism and separates into 7 colors without ceasing to be one light, your consciousness descends into manifestation through 7 bodies without ceasing to be one being. To understand yourself, you do not need more identity stories. You need engineering. You need to know which layer does what, which layer decays, which layer survives, which layer receives damage first, and which layer actually stores what matters. So now we lift the veils one by one. The first veil is the one you know best and understand worst, the physical body. This is the densest layer, the anchor, the hardware designed for 3D matter, built from carbon, water, iron, salts, proteins, and all the recycled elements of the earth. It is an extraordinary machine, precise, adaptive, and efficient, but it is also the least permanent of all your bodies. That should already force a correction in your thinking. The layer you trust most is the layer that changes most rapidly. Your cells die and regenerate constantly. In about 7 years, you no longer possess the same physical matter in any stable sense. The body is not a statue. It is a river pretending to be a statue because the flow is continuous enough to create the illusion of solidity. This makes the physical body important, but not primary. It is the final printout, the last surface where signals from subtler layers precipitate into matter. If the body falls ill, the visible breakdown often begins elsewhere. To treat only the physical is like trying to scrub a stain from a shadow on the wall while ignoring the object casting it. Now the second veil, the etheric body. This is where the invisible begins. A few centimeters above the skin, and penetrating every organ, there is a subtle duplicate, an energetic mold, the blueprint according to which the physical body is assembled and maintained. Before tissue grows, the matrix is already there. Before the cell knows where to divide, pattern has already been established. The ethereal body is not fantasy layered over biology, it is the organizing template behind it. This model explains phenomena that standard materialism still handles awkwardly, such as phantom limb pain. A limb is amputated, the physical structure is gone, and yet pain remains, position remains, sensation remains. Why? Because the physical limb is gone, but the etheric pattern remains. The nervous system continues receiving signals from a structure that has not disappeared at the level where the blueprint exists. This body is also the battery. Its function is to absorb, store, and distribute vital force, what Indian systems call prana, through channels known as nadis, comparable in function to what Chinese medicine maps as meridians. When people say, "I have no energy," they often assume the problem is chemical or nutritional only, but there are states where food is present, sleep is present, blood markers are acceptable, and still the person feels drained, gray, weak, unstable. That is often not a calorie problem. It is a distribution problem. The etheric layer is dirty, blocked, torn, or discharged. This is why certain people leave you exhausted in a way no conversation should justify. They do not take your blood, they drain your field. They attach not physically, but through vulnerable centers, often the solar plexus or spleen level, and siphon charge from the subtle battery. The body later registers the consequence. This etheric body survives only briefly after death, about 3 days, according to many esoteric systems, before it decomposes. What people sometimes describe in cemeteries or in certain transitional places as vague apparitions or will-o'-the-wisp effects may correspond not to the immortal soul, but to the residue of this dissolving ethereal shell. Now the third veil, the astral body, the body of desire. You already met it in chapter 4. This is the vehicle used in dreams, in emotional projection, in night travel. Unlike the etheric double, which closely follows physical structure, the astral body is fluid. It has no fixed outline because it is made of reactive substance. It changes color, texture, and density according to emotion. Anger throws dark red flashes and hook-like distortions through it. Fear turns it pale, gray, gelatinous. Love can tint it pink and gold. Depression locks it into something like a black enclosure. Most human beings live trapped here. Not consciously, but functionally. Their decisions are not guided by higher intelligence but by swings of desire, resentment, lust, fear, jealousy, and craving. They do not think they are emotional bodies. They think they are rational people who occasionally have feelings. That is backwards. Much of humanity is governed from this layer and only later justifies the result with thoughts. The astral body is also adhesive. It absorbs atmosphere. Enter a violent bar, a room saturated with addiction, resentment, or despair, and your astral field does not pass through untouched. It leaves coated in residue. You come back irritable, heavy, disturbed, or strangely dirty without knowing why. That is not mood for no reason. That is contamination, which is why astral hygiene matters. Cold water, clean air, incense used correctly, nature, high-frequency sound, silence. These are not quaint rituals. They are maintenance procedures for a body most people neglect while wondering why their emotions never stabilize. Now the fourth veil, the lower mental body. Above the astral in frequency but deeply entangled with it in ordinary life is the mental body, the seat of concrete thought, language, logic, planning, analysis, mathematics, conceptual structure. If etheric vision sees luminous mist and astral vision sees moving color, mental vision would see forms, yellow and blue geometric constructs around the head and shoulders, patterns of thought taking shape and holding structure. When you focus intensely, study cleanly, build an argument, solve a problem, this body brightens and expands. When you remain in confusion, chronic contradiction, sloppy thought, repetitive stupidity, it becomes cloudy, rigid, and disordered. Modern man suffers from an unusual imbalance here. He has not developed the higher mind. He has overbuilt the lower one. He has created shells of belief so rigid they function like armored cages. I can't. Life is hard. It's too late. Nothing changes. This is impossible. These are not harmless phrases passing through empty air. They are mental structures. and repeated often enough they harden into a helmet around consciousness, blocking higher input. People say they want an open mind while reinforcing a closed architecture every day. To open the mind is not to agree with everything. It is to break or soften these rigid formations so light from higher layers can enter. Now the fifth veil, and here the border becomes serious, the causal body. The first four bodies, physical, etheric, astral, lower mental, form the personality. They are temporary. They are tools for one incarnation. At death, the physical drops first. The etheric dissolves after a short interval. Over time, the astral also dissolves. Eventually, the lower mental sheath is shed. What remains? The causal body remains. This is the vehicle of the immortal soul, not the ego of psychology, but the enduring individuality that carries distilled essence across lifetimes. It is the permanent hard drive. Everything truly gained in a life, wisdom, love, compassion, developed capacity, real insight, is stored here. Your name is not stored. Your neuroses are not stored. Your social mask is not stored. Your temporary obsessions are not stored. The gold is kept. The noise is burned away. It is called causal for a reason. From this level, causes are selected for incarnation. The soul operating from this body chooses lessons, structures, tendencies, and conditions. It does not think in terms of comfort. It thinks in terms of growth. I need to learn patience. Then a personality may be constructed with anger tendencies, so patience can actually be forged rather than imagined. Here, karma is not punishment, it is architecture. This level is often perceived symbolically as a radiant sun or lotus in the chest, a deep core holding memory beyond one life. Great artists, inventors, and sages often access this body partially. Their intelligence does not proceed step by step, it arrives whole. They do not figure out in sequence. They know directly because the information comes from a layer that stores pattern, not fragments. Now, the sixth and seventh veils, the Buddhic and Atmic bodies. Here language begins to fail, not because nothing exists, but because ordinary thought is too blunt to describe it properly. The Buddhic level is the field of unity, intuition in its highest form, what some traditions would call Christic love. Not emotional attachment, not preference, not sentimental warmth, but the direct perception that separation is provisional and that consciousness is fundamentally shared. When awareness touches this level, love is no longer something you feel toward an object. It becomes the substance of perception itself. This corresponds to states described as samadhi, illumination, awakening. Beyond that is the Atmic level, the spark of pure divine will, the I am before personality, before narrative, before division. Not your preferences, not your image, not your biography, the raw principle of being itself. Here you and the universe are no longer experienced as separate systems. These higher bodies are latent in most people. Seeds, not active instruments. The initiate's work is to awaken conscious operation in them while still embodied. That is what enlightenment actually means, not escape from the body, but permanent access to higher bandwidth while remaining functional in matter. Now apply all this to health, because if this model remains abstract, it is useless. Western medicine tends to operate mechanistically. A part breaks. The part is repaired, removed, replaced, suppressed, or managed. That can be necessary, but it is often incomplete. Metaphysical medicine begins higher in the chain, because illness often follows a precipitation cascade. First, a distortion forms in the causal or mental level, perhaps a repeated belief. I do not deserve to live. I am trapped. I cannot forgive. I hate. That belief does not remain clean and abstract. It descends into the astral body and becomes emotion, resentment, grief, fear, rage. The astral field stains and thickens around the corresponding pattern. That emotional distortion then obstructs the etheric flow. Prana no longer circulates smoothly through the channels serving a particular organ or region. A jam forms, a vacuum forms. Months or years later, the physical tissue deprived of coherent energy begins to malfunction, mutate, weaken, inflame, or collapse. Then the symptom appears. Then the doctor sees it. Then the materialist says the disease began there, but it did not. It ended there. If you remove the tumor but do not transform the belief, and do not clean the emotional field that sustained the blockage, the pattern remains upstream. Relapse is not always bad luck. Sometimes it is unfinished architecture reproducing itself. True healing is vertical. It involves the body, yes, but also the subtle layers from which the body receives instruction, which means hygiene must also be vertical. You already wash the physical body every day. But if you never clean the subtle bodies, you accumulate psychic residue, astral grime, ethereal congestion, mental rigidity, and then wonder why life feels heavy before anything bad has even happened. So clean the veils. Salt water helps because salt is crystalline and interacts strongly with dense static charge. A soak with sea salt can clear residue from the etheric and astral layers. Smoke from certain sacred plants, sage, palo santo, copal, has long been used not because the smoke is magical, but because it interacts with atmosphere, attention, and subtle matter in ways many traditions independently discovered. Sound realigns. As Chapter 3 established, mantras, bowls, repeated coherent frequencies reorganize structure. Sunlight recharges the etheric battery quickly. 10 minutes a day of conscious solar exposure is not a superstition. It is a recharge protocol. Visualization also matters. Before leaving home, build your field deliberately. See an egg of blue or golden light around you and define the boundary. Decree clearly, my field is impenetrable to any energy lower than love. This is not childish fantasy. It is pattern setting. A field not consciously structured is easier to puncture, which leads to the old subject of psychic attack and the so-called evil eye. Strip away folklore and the mechanism is simple. Envy is focused, dirty intention. Hatred is concentrated projection. When someone stares at you with strong envy or malice, they are not merely thinking badly. They are launching a thought form from the astral mental level toward your field. If your aura is coherent, strong, and bright, the projectile does not penetrate. It rebounds. If your aura is full of holes, drugs, alcohol, guilt, fear, exhaustion, chronic weakness, the projection can lodge in the field and then the physical body begins to show the result. Sudden fatigue, headache, nausea, bad luck, energetic collapse. This is not witchcraft. It is energetic ballistics. And the cure is not paranoia. Seal the aura, raise the vibration, laugh, sing, pray, return to innocence and joy. Dense attachment cannot hold in a field that is bright, coherent, and clean. That is why the best protection is not fear of darkness, it is radiance. No darkness penetrates a true sun. Chapter 6. The throne of the heart, the toroidal field of Rad. You have been living from the wrong center. You were taught to place consciousness in the head, to treat the brain as king, logic as the final authority, and the heart as a sentimental side organ whose only job is to pump blood through soft biological pipes. But that model collapses the moment you examine the evidence closely, because the body itself is arranged around another throne. Put your hand on your chest and feel the beat. That rhythm was there before your reasoning mind existed, before language, before your first memory, before the fully formed brain you now worship as the seat of identity. And yet modern culture trained you to believe that the real you sits behind the eyes, managing reality from the cold attic of thought, while the heart merely maintains circulation. The soul's eye says the hierarchy has been reversed. The brain is not the king, it is the administrator. The heart is the sovereign field. Ancient traditions understood this with a precision that modern people mistake for poetry. The Chandogya Upanishad speaks of a small lotus-like chamber in the heart, and within that subtle space, a vastness equal to the outer cosmos. Heaven and earth, sun and moon, lightning and stars, all contain within what appears physically small. Pascal reached toward the same truth from another angle when he said that the heart has reasons. Reason does not understand, not because the heart is irrational, but because it operates in a domain of information that linear thought cannot access directly. The modern mind hears such lines and assumes metaphor. Then measurement arrives and begins to embarrass the intellect. The HeartMath Institute spent years studying the electromagnetic dynamics of the human system, comparing the activity of the brain with that of the heart, and the results were not subtle. The heart's electrical field is far stronger than the brain's. Its magnetic field is vastly stronger, measured as up to 5,000 times more powerful. That magnetic field does not remain trapped inside the ribcage, it extends beyond the body and can be detected several meters away with sensitive equipment. That changes the entire model. Because if one organ produces the dominant field, then that organ is not secondary, it is primary. You do not merely have feelings in the heart, you broadcast from it. The universe does not meet you first at the level of your thoughts. It meets you at the level of your field, and the strongest field in your body is not produced by the brain, but by the heart. Thinking is a weak signal compared to coherent feeling. The mind can rehearse an intention endlessly, but if the heart broadcasts contradiction, the deeper signal overrides the surface script. That is why so many people affirm one thing and continue to live another. The head speaks. The heart transmits. Now look at the architecture of that transmission. The field generated by the heart is not random, and it is not simply a sphere. It takes the form of a torus, a self-organizing flow pattern like a donut or an apple-shaped current, where energy emerges from a central axis, rises, expands outward, folds around the body, moves downward, and re-enters the system in a continuous loop. This is not a decorative spiritual symbol. It is one of the fundamental structures through which energy stabilizes itself in nature. The Earth's magnetic field is toroidal. The Sun's field behaves toroidally. Many models of atomic and galactic energy dynamics also exhibit toroidal behavior. And you do too. As above, so below was never vague mysticism. It was pattern recognition. This toroidal field around the heart functions as both shield and sensor. Everything enters it before it reaches your skin in any meaningful way. Social atmosphere, emotional charge, stress patterns, even the subtle pressure of a room. If the toroidal field is coherent, strong, and ordered, it acts like an energetic immune barrier, deflecting what is chaotic and amplifying what is aligned. If the field is fractured by chronic fear, grief, resentment, or stress, then the system becomes porous. You feel invaded more easily, drained more easily, destabilized more easily. Spiritual strength is not an abstract virtue. It is field integrity. Now move from the field to the organ itself. For centuries, medicine treated the heart as muscle, a powerful pump, but nothing more. Then neurocardiology complicated the picture. Researchers identified an intrinsic nervous system within the heart itself, approximately 40,000 sensory neurons, enough to justify the phrase, the little brain in the heart. These neurons are not decorative. They process signals, affect function, and participate in regulation. The heart also produces hormones, including oxytocin, associated with bonding, trust, and emotional regulation. More importantly, the flow of information is not one way. The heart sends massive amounts of information upward to the brain. In fact, the ascending signals from heart to head are more influential than most people realize. The heart is constantly instructing the brain on how to interpret the present. When the heart's rhythm becomes chaotic through stress or fear, that signal reaches the brain and biases perception toward threat. The prefrontal cortex quiets down. Reactivity increases. Intelligence narrows. Survival circuits dominate. People then say, "I'm not thinking clearly." Correct. But the problem did not begin in the brain. It began in the heart's pattern. When the heart beats in a coherent rhythm, smooth, ordered, stable, the signal sent upward is entirely different. The nervous system relaxes. Higher cognitive functions come online. Creativity increases. Empathy rises. Decision-making improves. You do not think your way into peace first and then feel better. Often the order runs the other way. You create a coherent cardiac state, and only then does the brain regain access to its best functions. This is why heart coherence matters. Normally, heart, brain, and nervous system run out of sync. The mind worries about the future. The body reacts to the present. The emotional field carries residue from the past, and the signal broadcast into the larger field becomes noise. Noisy signal. Noisy life. A person in that condition does not merely feel stressed, they emit incoherence. Coherence is the opposite state. It is phase alignment. Like an orchestra that stops warming up and begins playing the same piece in the same key. Heart coherence occurs when physiological systems synchronize around a stable emotional frequency, and the heart rhythm begins to resemble a smooth, ordered wave instead of a jagged stress pattern. This is not speculative language. It is measurable in heart rate variability studies. And the method is simple enough to offend the ego. Not more thinking, more feeling with precision. Bring attention to the center of the chest. Breathe slowly and evenly, often around 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. Then evoke, not imagine in a dry mental way, but actually evoke, a coherent feeling such as gratitude, appreciation, reverence, or genuine love. Within about 60 seconds, the field changes, the heart rhythm smooths, the nervous system shifts, the signal leaving your body becomes ordered, your voltage rises, your intuition sharpens, your presence changes. People notice this without knowing why. This is the entrance to what many traditions call the sacred space of the heart. The Upanishads described it. Later mystics spoke of it as a hidden chamber, a secret room, a subtle sanctuary. Some modern esoteric writers call it the 0 point within the torus. The language changes, but the underlying proposal is the same. Within the heart's energy structure, there is a focal point of awareness from which consciousness can perceive differently than it does from the head. Most people live behind the eyes. That position creates duality by default. Good, bad, mine, yours, past, future. Threat, desire. The head is useful, but it is a division machine. It parses, compares, separates, and categorizes. Necessary, yes. Sufficient, no. The initiate learns to relocate awareness. Not metaphorically, experientially. To move consciousness from the forehead and throat down into the chest, and from there to perceive the world without the same constant fragmentation. In the heart's chamber, thought slows down, judgment loses its grip, and the eternal now becomes less a concept than a lived condition. The heart does not speak in argument. It speaks in direct knowing. This is why intuition is so often confused with instinct. The two are not the same. Instinct belongs closer to the solar plexus and survival circuitry. It is reactive, visceral, often entangled with trauma, fear, or desire. It can be useful, but it is not always clean. Intuition from the heart is different. It is fast, quiet, neutral, and strangely complete. It does not shout. It does not negotiate. It simply knows. And the evidence for this gets uncomfortably interesting. In laboratory experiments where participants were shown random images, some calm, some disturbing, physiological sensors sometimes detected changes in heart response seconds before the image was displayed, and before the brain appeared to register anything consciously. The interpretation remains debated, as all honest science should remain cautious. But the pattern is suggestive. The heart appears able to register information outside the normal sequence of conscious perception. The ancient model would say the heart touches the field before the mind names what is in it. The future is not fully non-existent to the heart. It is already latent in the field. This makes the heart not merely an emotional organ, but a temporal sensor. If the toroidal field interfaces with a larger informational matrix, as this book has been building chapter after chapter, then intuition is not guesswork. It is field contact, which means that listening to the heart is not anti-intellectual. It is pre-intellectual. It provides data before thought begins distorting it. Now consider protection. You live in a constant sea of interference, collective stress, human negativity, overstimulation, electromagnetic environments, social aggression, unresolved emotion. If you remain in fear, the toroidal field contracts. A contracted field is not safer. It is weaker. It becomes dense, brittle, easily penetrated. If you enter appreciation, love, reverence, the field expands and smooths. A coherent field behaves like a deflector. Lower patterns lose grip against it. This is why love is so badly misunderstood. Love is not merely moral sweetness or passivity. Love in its higher form is a state of high coherence, high amplitude, and stable order. Biologically, positive coherent emotions have been associated with beneficial shifts in autonomic balance and immune function, including changes in immunoglobulin A, one of the body's first-line defenses. Fear and anger, especially prolonged, suppress function. Gratitude and love enhance regulation. An open heart is not weak. It is the strongest shield in the system. A closed heart looks defended, but often it is only armored around decay. It is protecting pain by shutting down flow, and in shutting down flow, it weakens the field it hoped to preserve. Now, the proper solution is not to discard the brain. That would be another imbalance. The goal is union. The Egyptians held the heart in supreme symbolic importance not because they despised intellect, but because they understood order. The heart determines the what and the why. Meaning, value, vision, purpose. The brain determines the how, sequence, strategy, execution, language, logistics. When the brain usurps the throne, decisions get made from fear, status, scarcity, and ego, while the deeper center is silenced. That produces a world full of technical competence and spiritual collapse. When the heart leads and the brain serves, something else happens. The fire rises. The mind becomes illuminated rather than anxious. Thought is no longer severed from love, and emotion is no longer severed from wisdom. There is less inner civil war, fewer contradictory signals, stronger transmission, cleaner action. This is Gnosis in practice. Not vague inspiration, but the joining of field and intellect into one circuit. And that circuit does not stop at the individual. Your toroidal field is not isolated. It nests inside larger fields, beginning with the Earth itself. The Global Coherence Initiative, associated with HeartMath, was built around this possibility that synchronized human emotion may have measurable relationships with larger geomagnetic patterns. It is a broadcasting station inside a planetary field, which means your responsibility is larger than comfort. When you stabilize your heart, you do not merely feel better. You reduce noise in the network. You become a pacemaker in a culture of arrhythmia. If enough people entered genuine coherence at once, not slogan, not ideology, but true coherent feeling, the field effects would not remain personal. Social behavior would shift. Violence would decrease. Clarity would spread. What politics tries to force from the outside, coherence can begin from within. That sounds idealistic only until you remember the numbers. The heart's electrical field is around 60 times stronger than the brain's. The magnetic field can be around 5,000 times stronger. The king has always been on the throne. You were simply taught to ignore him. And the moment you stop living from the head alone, the entire architecture of reality begins to rearrange itself around the chamber that was always there, waiting in the center of the lotus, silent, vast, and more spacious than the sky. Chapter 7. The crystal gland, the pineal, and the third eye. The world you call reality is not all that exists. It is only the part your internal receiver still has the ability to decode. Ancient traditions did not speak carelessly when they referred to the single eye. Matthew 6:22 says it directly. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. That line has been reduced for centuries to metaphor, moral advice, or soft spirituality, when it is far more exact than that. There is, in the center of the brain, an organ long associated with this hidden faculty, an organ that older civilizations treated with reverence and modern culture treated with neglect. The ancients called it the third eye. Science calls it the pineal gland. Neither name is sufficient, because this is not merely a gland in the ordinary endocrine sense. It is a crystalline transducer, a biological interface, a structure capable of translating subtler frequencies into inner imagery, intuition, dream architecture, and altered states of perception. While it sleeps, you remain locked inside the five-sense version of reality. When it begins to wake, the edges of that prison weaken. Then, the world becomes larger than matter. Deep inside the skull, sheltered in darkness, lies a small pine-cone-shaped organ, no bigger than a pea. For a long time, Western medicine treated it as a biological leftover, a vestigial curiosity, useful perhaps for hormonal rhythm but spiritually irrelevant. That dismissal says more about the narrowness of the model than the insignificance of the organ. René Descartes, despite all his limitations, was obsessed with one question: where does matter meet spirit? And he identified the pineal as the likely seat of that interface. Ancient Egyptians encoded a similar intuition in another language. The symbolism of the Eye of Horus, when compared to a sagittal section of the human brain, lines up with disturbing precision around the region of the pineal, thalamus, and corpus callosum. The motif of the pinecone appears again and again in Sumerian iconography, in the Thyrsus of Dionysus, in the stylized cranial form of the Buddha, in Vatican symbolism where a giant bronze pinecone still stands in plain sight. That repetition matters. Civilizations do not keep venerating the same symbol across centuries and continents because of decorative coincidence. They do it because a piece of knowledge was preserved through image long after language failed to protect it. You possess more than 5 senses, but the 6th has been allowed to atrophy. Biology itself points in that direction more strongly than most people realize. The pineal gland is not just soft tissue floating uselessly in the dark. Research has shown that it contains structures comparable to retinal tissue. In evolutionary biology, pineal organs in some species function directly as photoreceptive organs. Even in humans, the gland remains closely tied to cycles of light and darkness and receives indirect information from the eyes through neural pathways regulating circadian rhythm. That already raises the obvious question. Why would a hidden organ in darkness retain a design so closely linked to light detection? The material answer is circadian regulation, and that is true as far as it goes. But it may not go far enough. Because the pineal does not need ordinary sunlight where it is positioned for another kind of reception. When you close your eyes and imagine an apple, where does that image appear? Not on the surface of the eyelids, not in front of the face. It appears on an internal screen, an imaginal field. Dreams use it, visions use it, symbols arise on it, memory projects through it, imagination trains it. Mystical experience can overwhelm it. Without that internal screen, human consciousness would be reduced to surface computation. You would process data, you would not see inwardly. Now move to the structure that makes the pineal so difficult to dismiss. Within the gland there are microscopic crystals, commonly called brain sand, corpora arenacea, containing mineral compounds such as calcite. Some researchers have noted that these microcrystals may display piezoelectric characteristics. That phrase matters because piezoelectric materials convert mechanical pressure into electrical charge and electrical charge into mechanical response. Quartz does this. So do components inside watches, sensors, and communication devices. Now place that idea inside the brain. A gland containing microcrystalline structures, suspended in fluid sensitive to pressure, electromagnetism, and chemical state, located in the center of the head, already associated with light-dark cycles, dream states, internal imagery, and altered consciousness. That is no longer trivial anatomy. That begins to look like an antenna, a transducer. A device that can receive one type of signal and convert it into another form the system can interpret. This is why ancient descriptions of visions should not be dismissed too quickly as metaphor, delusion, or primitive superstition. If the receiver is clean and tuned, information that normally remains below conscious threshold may arrive not as dry data, but as symbolic images, complete scenes, or instantaneous knowing. The brain then renders it the only way it knows how, through image, sound, felt certainty, inner light. You have the same equipment. The problem is not absence of hardware. The problem is contamination and disuse. Before we get to contamination, we need the chemistry. The pineal governs cycles. In light conditions, it participates in the regulation of serotonin-linked wakefulness and daytime alignment. In darkness, it shifts toward melatonin production, guiding sleep, repair, and the threshold states through which dream consciousness emerges. This part is accepted science. What remains controversial, but impossible to ignore in this discussion, is its connection to endogenous dimethyltryptamine, DMT. Rick Strassman famously referred to DMT as the spirit molecule, arguing that it may play a role in extraordinary states, birth, death, and mystical perception. The biochemistry is still debated. The full endogenous production pathways in humans remain under active inquiry, so caution is required, but the pattern is suggestive. Extreme darkness, deep meditation, near-death states, and certain threshold experiences have long been associated with an opening of perception, collapse of ordinary time sense, emergence of geometry, contact with intelligence, and radical shifts in the felt structure of reality. Whether one explains that entirely through neurochemistry or through neurochemistry plus transdimensional reception, the pineal sits too close to the center of the event to be ignored. If melatonin governs sleep, then the next stage may govern the opening of the inner screen. And when that screen floods with geometry, beings, light, or timelessness, older traditions say the veil has thinned. Not reality. The filter. This leads directly to the sabotage. If the pineal is part of the interface, why is it so inactive in most people? Why does imagination feel weak, dream recall poor, intuition unstable, and mystical perception rare? One answer repeatedly appears: calcification. With age, the pineal commonly accumulates calcium deposits. This is documented. The gland can harden. Its flexibility reduces. Its function may degrade. In mainstream terms, this relates to aging and dysregulated rhythms. In esoteric terms, the antenna is being covered in stone. Now add environment. Fluoride exposure has long been controversial in this discussion. Claims are often exaggerated, but the concern did not arise from nowhere. Some research has shown fluoride accumulation in the pineal, and the possibility that it may contribute to calcification has fueled decades of debate. Add to that processed food, mineral imbalance, pesticide load, metabolic stress, synthetic light, and one of the biggest offenders of modern life: blue light at night. A screen at 11 p.m. tells the pineal it is noon. The gland becomes confused. Melatonin drops. Sleep degrades. Dream quality changes. The entire rhythm of the receiver is disrupted. This is not abstract wellness advice. It is a direct assault on the instrument through which darkness is supposed to become perception rather than mere fatigue. A population cut off from deep sleep, deep darkness, deep dream, and deep intuition is easier to manage because it remains locked in surface cognition. It loses vertical access. The good news is that the process is not necessarily final. You can reduce the burden. Filter water. Reduce heavy metal exposure. Lower unnecessary fluoride intake where possible. Eat foods high in chlorophyll and mineral intelligence rather than dead processed residue. Spirulina, chlorella, raw cacao, iodine-rich support, boron in appropriate contexts. Many traditions and modern practitioners use these as part of decalcification protocols. Some claims go too far, but the broader principle holds. Remove the sludge and the instrument begins to recover. More important than supplements, however, is darkness. Absolute darkness. No standby LED, no flashing chargers, no blue light leaking through the room. Darkness is not emptiness for the pineal. It is activation space. Sleep in total darkness long enough and the chemistry begins to normalize. The gland remembers the difference between day and night. The system begins to generate the right molecules at the right time. Dream depth improves. Recall improves. The threshold grows thinner. There is also the old practice of sun gazing, which must be approached with caution and only under safe conditions near sunrise or sunset, because reckless imitation can damage vision. But the principle beneath it is simple. Controlled natural light exposure at the edges of the day helps regulate the photobiology of the entire system, indirectly supporting pineal timing, hormonal rhythm, and inner stability. Clean the lens, then turn on the projector. Because cleaning alone is not activation. Activation requires pressure. If those microcrystals function piezoelectrically, they respond not only to chemistry, but to mechanical influence. This is where yogic and breath traditions become extremely interesting. Cerebrospinal fluid bathes the brain and spinal cord. Rhythmic breathing, spinal alignment, pelvic floor contraction, and certain internal locks, such as Mula Bandha in yogic systems, are said to drive pressure upward through the cerebrospinal axis. From a mystical point of view, this pumps energy to the head. From a biomechanical point of view, it alters pressure dynamics and neural state. When the pressure, chemistry, rhythm, and attention align, people often report very specific effects. Pressure between the brows, an inner click, flashes of white or blue light, sudden geometric fields behind closed eyes, or an unmistakable sense that the internal screen has turned on at a higher voltage. The ancients called this awakening. Not because a metaphor became emotionally satisfying, but because something literal happened in perception. Darkness meditation takes this even further. Yogis, Taoist adepts, and initiates across traditions went into caves, dark rooms, sealed monasteries, not as punishment but as technology. Remove all external light for long enough and the brain is forced to reconfigure its internal dependence. Melatonin saturates. Imagery intensifies. Visual phenomena emerge even with the eyes open. The inner world becomes optically active. People who have undergone extended darkness retreats often report geometry, light forms, body of light perception, radical dream lucidity, and an altered relationship to time. Again, interpretations vary, but the method is ancient because it works. The cave was not a symbol, it was a laboratory. For those who cannot disappear into a mountain, even controlled darkness at home, used intelligently and not theatrically, can become a lesser version of the same science. Then there is sound. Chapter 3 established that sound organizes matter. Here the same law is applied locally. The humming breath practice, known as Brahmari Pranayama, the bee breath, creates resonance in the skull. Covering the senses lightly, inhaling, and producing a deep humming vibration sends a physical massage through the cranial cavity. Traditions claim it stimulates the gland, breaks subtle stagnation, and increases the flow of inner nectar. At minimum, it changes state. At maximum, it may help reactivate the receiver. Binaural beats and isochronic tones, especially in higher gamma ranges such as 40 Hz and above, are also used by many practitioners to synchronize hemispheric activity and concentrate attention around the third eye region. These tools are not magic, but they can be functional when used well. They do not create awakening by themselves. They reduce noise, organize rhythm, and make entry easier. But now comes the most important distinction in the entire chapter. Seeing is not the same as imagining. Many people confuse the two, and then either inflate fantasy into revelation or dismiss genuine subtle perception as daydreaming. The difference is clean. In imagination, you generate the image. You decide what appears. It takes effort. It carries the signature of your will. In real vision, the image arrives on its own. You do not push it into existence. You witness it. It has a hyper-real quality, often more stable and more textured than ordinary imagination, sometimes carrying colors or structures not easily reproduced by deliberate fantasy. Imagination is projective, vision is receptive. Imagination is training, vision is transmission. When the third eye genuinely begins to work, information does not arrive as vague artistic haze. It often comes in complete packets, geometry and tension, symbolic structures, certainty without analysis. You do not pretend to see an aura. You feel or see the field with startling objective conviction. You do not force meaning. Meaning arrives with the image. The pineal does not work alone, however. It has a partner, the pituitary. Esoteric systems often describe the pineal as electrical, solar, masculine. The pituitary is magnetic, lunar, feminine. Whether one likes that symbolism or not, the deeper point remains useful. The two glands form a polarity. When energy rises through the spine and the cranial field becomes sufficiently active, a circuit forms between these poles. Some traditions describe this as a luminous triangle in the head, the sacred marriage, the union of light and water, father and mother, current and receptivity. From that union, a higher consciousness is born. The divine child is not a mythic baby. It is awakened, integrated awareness. There is a warning here, and it cannot be softened. Do not force the eye open. Modern seekers often want the final effect without preparation and use psychedelics, synthetic compounds, or aggressive practices to kick the door open before the lower bodies are cleaned. That is like sending industrial voltage through a weak bulb. The nervous system may not hold it. Unresolved fear, astral contamination, rigid belief structures, trauma residue, and ego hunger all rush upward when the gate opens too fast. Then the person does not reach heaven. They reach amplification, and whatever was unintegrated becomes monstrous. This is why some spiritual emergencies resemble madness. The eye opened, but the heart was not ready. The lower bodies were not cleaned. The field could not metabolize what entered. Power without coherence becomes distortion. Vision without heart becomes manipulation. A third eye opened over a closed heart does not produce wisdom. It produces cold psychic intelligence, a person who can perceive but not love, a mind with access and no purity. That is why the safe sequence matters, and why this book has built in the order it has built. First, clean the body. Then stabilize emotion. Then order the mind. Then awaken the heart. Only then let vision ignite. Because the third eye is not the beginning. It is the lens that becomes trustworthy only when the rest of the system stops lying. And when it does open properly, the result is not fantasy, not escape, not decorative spirituality, but the return of an organ that was always meant to remind you that matter is only the first layer of light. Chapter 8. The Alphabet of Symbols, Intuition versus Reason. The soul does not argue, it shows. That is why the deepest truths in your life rarely arrive as sentences. They arrive as images, coincidences, dreams, bodily symptoms, sudden inner certainty, repeating patterns that bypass your polished logic and strike somewhere older, faster, and far less willing to negotiate with your excuses. Aristotle put it cleanly, the soul never thinks without an image. That single statement explains more than most modern theories of consciousness, because it tells you immediately that reason is not the first language of the psyche. Reason comes later. Reason labels, arranges, compares, explains. The soul does something else. It compresses meaning into form. It speaks in scenes, symbols, atmospheres, archetypes, and patterns dense enough to carry emotional, mental, historical, and spiritual information all at once. A word is thin, a symbol is loaded. Take the word table. It is useful but dead. A label, a functional unit of speech. But the image of a table can become something else entirely depending on context. An altar, a negotiation, a family meal, a betrayal, a sacrifice, a banquet, a final conversation, a place where peace is made or broken. Reason sees the category. Intuition sees the field around it. That difference is everything. Imagine arriving in a distant country where you do not speak the language. People talk and you hear noise. Street signs are everywhere, but the alphabet is meaningless to you. You feel cut off, confused, dependent. Then you see a red circle with a white bar across it. Instantly you understand, do not enter. A fork and knife, food. A cross on a building, spiritual function. No translation needed, no grammar, no analysis. Meaning arrives whole. This is how the soul communicates. The universe does not speak English, Spanish, or Chinese. Those are local systems built by the linear mind to manage dense reality, useful but limited, good for contracts, schedules, measurements, and survival. But when consciousness speaks to itself at a deeper level, through dreams, synchronicities, archetypal images, bodily messages, symbolic events, it uses a faster language, not sentences, packets. An image is not worth 1,000 words because it is poetic. It is worth 1,000 words because it carries them compressed. This is why intuition always feels faster than reason. Your brain contains at least two very different modes of operation. One is linear, analytic, stepwise. It moves from A to B to C, dissects the parts, compares variables, and slowly builds a conclusion. For physical tasks, for engineering, for planning, for speech and sequence, this is indispensable. But it is also slow. The other mode is holistic. It sees the whole pattern before it can explain a single part. It joins rather than divides. It recognizes atmosphere, gesture, symbol, rhythm, proportion, and emotional charge almost instantly. It is the language of dreams, art, myth, body language, archetype, and direct knowing. Modern education trains the first mode mercilessly and starves the second. You are rewarded for what you can explain, justify, and prove in words. If you say, I know something is wrong, but I can't explain why, you are treated as irrational. That conditioning has a cost. Reason is a map. Intuition is the territory. The map matters, but it is not the street, the weather, the smell in the air, the tension before an event, the invisible signal your nervous system detected before your intellect caught up. A map may say a place is statistically safe. Intuition may say, do not go there tonight. The map will call this illogical. Your life may later call it accurate. The soul's eye operates through symbolic intuition. Not because it hates logic, but because logic is too slow and too narrow for the density of information being transferred. Consider maternal love. If you try to define it with reason, you may need an entire volume. Biology, attachment, sacrifice, hormonal bonding, developmental psychology, memory, protection, tenderness, suffering, devotion. But show the image of mother and child in a sacred composition and the psyche receives the whole packet at once. Tenderness, protection, offering, divine vulnerability, nourishment, continuity. The symbol lands before the intellect begins its paperwork. This is why dreams speak in images. If your soul wants to tell you that your emotional foundation is failing, it does not usually deliver a tidy speech saying, your inner structures are outdated, and your life architecture requires revision. Your ego would argue immediately. It would defend itself, reinterpret, minimize, delay. So instead, the soul shows you a house collapsing. The message enters past the guards. You wake with fear or urgency or sadness, and that emotional charge forces attention. The symbol worked because it bypassed the border patrol of reason. It is a Trojan horse delivering truth into a defended mind. This is also why cheap symbolic dictionaries are mostly useless. Dreaming of teeth does not automatically mean death. Dreaming of water does not always mean emotion. Symbols are archetypal, yes, but they are also personal. Their meaning is shaped by your own emotional history. A dog for one person is loyalty. For another, bitten in childhood, it is threat. The symbol itself is neutral. Your charge completes the circuit. So when decoding dreams, do not begin with, what does this mean in a dictionary? Begin with two better questions. What did I feel? And what function does this image serve in my life right now? If you dream of missing a train, the message is rarely about transportation. It points to missed timing, delayed decision, a life opportunity slipping forward while you stand frozen. If you dream of losing your voice, it may not predict illness but expose suppression. If you dream of being naked in public, it may point to exposure, shame, or the terror of being seen without the costume. The plot is secondary. The atmosphere is primary. Was the dream oppressive, luminous, nostalgic, urgent, sacred, contaminated, cold, playful, humiliating? That background emotional climate is often the real transmission from the deeper psyche. The soul is not writing literature. It is sending status reports. And it does not stop when you wake. Carl Jung gave the modern world one of its most useful keys when he described synchronicity. Meaningful coincidence without obvious causal sequence. You think intensely of a person and they call. You are wrestling with a problem and the exact symbol or phrase needed appears in a book, on a screen, on a passing truck, in a stranger's sentence. You see repeating numbers, 1 or to win, 333, 4 or 44, one letter on win, not once but in clusters, during periods of unusual internal tension or alignment. Reason says coincidence. The soul's eye asks a better question. Why this? Why now? And why does it carry emotional voltage? Synchronicity is not childish magic. It is evidence that the psychic world and the physical world are not sealed off from one another. They interpenetrate. The outer world behaves at times like a denser extension of the same symbolic system that appears in dreams. When your internal state changes, the external environment often begins to mirror that shift through pattern, timing, obstruction, invitation, and repetition. Reality itself becomes legible. If you repeatedly see runway-like alignment, help arriving at the right moment, doors opening, numbers repeating during times of focus, confirmations coming from multiple angles, it often signals coherence. Not destiny in some rigid sense, but alignment between your attention and the current you are moving in. If instead everything becomes obstruction, lost keys, broken devices, missed exits, delays, wrong turns, repeated friction, it may not be punishment. It may be symbolic resistance. The system saying, slow down, correct course, stop forcing. The master reads these things, not superstitiously, literarily. Reality becomes a sacred text, and events become glyphs. This opens into the realm of archetypes. Within the deeper strata of psyche, and what Jung called the collective unconscious, there exist recurring energy patterns, universal characters, molds through which human life expresses itself. The hero, the mother, the sage, the trickster, the martyr, the lover, the warrior, the shadow. These are not simply literary devices. They are functions. Human beings slide into them constantly. If you are in struggle, conquest, training, testing, you may be living through the hero or warrior pattern. If you are nurturing, protecting, carrying, sacrificing, the mother pattern may be active. If you are breaking structure, mocking conventions, introducing chaos that forces transformation, the trickster may be in play. These types are not the problem. Unconscious possession by them is. A man under the warrior archetype who does not know it will find enemies everywhere. He will turn every disagreement into battle, every conversation into threat, every room into a battlefield. A person gripped by martyr energy will unconsciously arrange situations that confirm sacrifice, suffering, and under-recognition. The soul's eye provides distance. I am inside that pattern again. That recognition creates freedom. You stop being a puppet inside the myth. You become its reader. Now we step into territory that skeptics love to mock because they confuse misuse with the tool itself. Tarot and oracles. A deck of cards is not magic cardboard predicting marriage to a dark-haired stranger. That is performance, projection, or fraud. But as a symbolic technology, tarot is much more interesting than most skeptics allow. The 22 major arcana, for example, can be understood as stages in a journey of consciousness, the fool's journey, from raw emergence to integration. When someone shuffles a symbolic system while focusing attention, they are not forcing the future to reveal itself. They are allowing the subconscious to arrange a mirror. The card drawn is not a command from outside. It is a symbolic exposure of what is already active inside. Draw the tower, a lightning strike, a collapse, bodies falling, and the card does not mean your building will literally be destroyed. It may mean a false structure in your life is unstable and about to crack. A lie, an identity, a job, a belief system. The symbol does not create the event. It names the pattern. That is why tarot, used correctly, is not fortune-telling. It is symbolic diagnosis. The oracle does not tell you something alien. It brings to light what you already knew in the dark. Now come to the densest and most honest symbol of all, the body. The body is not only biology, it is meaning made flesh. It records, protests, compensates, and announces what the mind refuses to say. The mind can rationalize almost anything. I'm fine, this relationship is fine, this work is fine, this pace is fine. The body is usually less diplomatic. Chronic stomach trouble may not be just stress. Symbolically, the stomach concerns digestion, not just of food, but of reality. What can you not swallow? What are you forcing yourself to tolerate? The throat concerns expression. What truth is not being spoken? What anger is being held down until the tissue itself tightens? Lower back issues often cluster around support, material pressure, financial fear, or feeling that the burden of survival is carried alone. Shoulders and upper back often carry burden, duty, obligation. Knees relate symbolically to flexibility and pride, your ability to bend. Legs and feet concern movement and direction, your capacity to step into the future. These correspondences are not rigid formulas, but they are useful lenses. When symptoms appear, ask 2 questions before rushing past the message. What does this symptom prevent me from doing? And what does it force me to do? A broken leg may not be cosmic punishment. It may be the blunt symbolic version of a subtle message you ignored for too long. Stop running. Stop moving in this direction. Stop accelerating past your own truth. Symptoms are not always enemies. Sometimes they are messengers, and messengers often withdraw once the message is finally received. This is where ritual becomes essential. Reason communicates with arguments. The unconscious communicates with symbolic action. If you want to close a deep cycle, it is often not enough to think differently. Thought lives near the surface. The deeper psyche responds to enacted symbolism. Write the letter you never sent. Burn it. Bury the ashes. Wash in a river. Cut the hair. Rearrange the house. Clean the room you kept avoiding. Place an object on the altar. Break, bury, or release something that has represented the old pattern. This is not superstition. It is psychodrama with precision. Fire means transformation. Water means cleansing. Burial means completion. Cutting means separation. The subconscious understands this immediately. The act says, the file is closed. The system updates. This is why people feel real liberation after a powerful ritual, even when nothing external has changed. Something external did change. The symbol was embodied. The message reached the depth at which thought alone had failed. Finally, how do you develop symbolic vision in daily life? You stop staring so hard. Most people operate with what we could call the hard gaze. Narrow, analytical, target-oriented, useful for reading numbers, checking prices, driving, measuring, identifying. But symbolic vision depends on another mode, the soft gaze, peripheral, receptive, not hunting for a fact but allowing pattern to reveal itself. Imagine you are in a business meeting. Hard gaze reads the contract, scans the figures, checks the formal details. Good, necessary. But soft gaze notices the room, the breathing pattern, the micro-hesitations, the shift in posture each time money is mentioned, the client touching the nose or covering the mouth at a specific question, the smile that lands 1 second too late. Then intuition sends you an image: smoke, snake, broken glass, tight wire. You do not yet have proof, but you have a symbol. That symbol is not the conclusion. It is the knock on the door. Investigate further, and often reason discovers what intuition already knew. This is how the two should work together. Not as enemies, as sequence. First intuition receives, then reason verifies. Walk through nature with the soft gaze and the world stops looking dead. A tree can communicate patience, endurance, rootedness without saying a word. A bird crossing open sky can awaken a precise ache for freedom inside your chest. A decaying wall can reveal the truth about an aging identity. The world becomes less like a warehouse of objects and more like a living symbolic field speaking back to you. That is the alphabet of symbols. And once you begin to read it, you discover that life has been talking to you the entire time. Through dreams, through coincidence, through pain, through image, through atmosphere, through the body, through the small repeating signs you kept dismissing because they did not arrive in the grammar of the mind. The soul does not argue, it shows, and the moment you learn that language, the universe stops being silent. Chapter 9. The Merkaba, the light body. Your body was never meant to be your final form. It was meant to be your temporary shell, useful, necessary, but incomplete, a chrysalis dense enough to let consciousness enter matter and learn from resistance before remembering how to move again. This is the part most people never reach, because they spend their whole lives repairing the shell, decorating the shell, protecting the shell, worshipping the shell, and then calling that survival wisdom, when all the while something far more important remains folded around them, dormant, waiting like a parachute that was never opened, or like a spacecraft hidden beneath a layer of ordinary flesh. Ezekiel tried to describe it and had to resort to fire, amber, brightness, wheels within wheels, because language breaks when perception exceeds the vocabulary available to it. What he saw was not only a religious spectacle. It was motion geometry, organized light, a vehicle of consciousness whose structure was so exact and so alive that the only honest way to speak of it was through images that sounded impossible. The ancient traditions gave that vehicle a name: Merkaba. If the physical body is the chrysalis, then the soul is the butterfly, but a butterfly does not cross dimensions with skin and bone. It requires another body, one made not of muscle or feather, but of light, proportion, and rotation. These are the wings, not poetic wings, functional wings. The architecture by which spirit ceases to be trapped in density and begins to move through realities without being crushed by them. That is why this teaching does not stand alone. It could never come first. Before a pilot is shown the controls of a high-voltage craft, the machine itself must be made ready. The lower layers had to be cleaned. The hidden anatomy had to be understood. The throne had to be restored to the heart. The inner lens had to be cleared. The symbolic language by which deeper intelligence speaks had to begin reopening. Otherwise, the whole thing degenerates into fantasy, ego theater, or an occult cartoon painted over an unchanged nervous system. Now the scale changes. You are not here merely to survive the world. You are here to remember the vehicle by which consciousness can exceed it. The word itself carries that memory. In Jewish mysticism, Merkaba is the chariot, the throne vehicle of ascent. In esoteric Egyptian interpretations, the syllables are often rendered as light, spirit, and body, pointing toward a field in which body and spirit are enclosed within counter-rotating light. Strict historians will dispute exact linguistic lineage, and that is fine. The important point is the persistent idea shared across traditions: man is not limited to the biological frame. He can be surrounded by an organized light structure that functions as transport. Without it, spirit is heavy. With it, spirit becomes free. And freedom here does not mean vague emotional relief. It means mobility across states of being. It means no longer experiencing matter as a sealed prison. It means becoming the one who holds the key instead of the one locked in the cell. So what is the shape of this hidden craft? Not a flat symbol, not a decorative star on paper, a real spatial form. Visualize the human body standing at the center of two interlocking tetrahedrons, one pointing upward, one pointing downward, each a three-dimensional pyramid of equal precision. The upward one is often described as solar, electric, projective. The downward one as terrestrial, magnetic, receptive. Their union forms the star tetrahedron, a living equilibrium of opposite but complementary principles. You stand in the center of that balance. 1 point above the head, 1 point below the feet. The body held exactly in the crossing. This is not said to be imaginary. According to the teaching, this geometry already exists around the human being on the etheric and electromagnetic levels. But in most people it is static, asleep, like an extraordinary machine parked in darkness with no current running through it. The structure is present. The field is not yet alive. That distinction matters. Because the Merkaba is not fabricated from nothing. It is activated. And activation requires movement. This is where the old descriptions of wheels within wheels become technically meaningful. The tetrahedral fields are not meant to remain still. They are said to spin in opposite directions, one counter to the other, and through that counter rotation, a far larger field is generated around the body. The result is not only a star but a sphere, a living shell, a force field, a transport chamber. Think of a jet turbine, a tornado, or two opposite currents creating a stable vortex. Static form alone does not generate lift. Motion does, and not any motion. Balanced opposition held in coherence. One field rotates one way, the other the opposite way, and between them a vortex forms. Around that vortex, a sphere of energy stabilizes. Within that sphere, according to the teaching, ordinary 3D conditions begin to loosen. Gravity weakens. Time behaves differently. Consciousness can move more freely. The body itself becomes lighter, more responsive, less locked into the usual density. This is why the language of chariots, fiery ascent, and bodies of glory kept returning across cultures. The great mystics were not only speaking about moral elevation, they were trying, however imperfectly, to describe a field event. The difficult part for modern people is not the geometry, it is the fuel. Because the first question that appears is obvious. If such a technology exists, why has it not been weaponized by every ambitious mind in history? The answer is brutal and elegant, because it does not run on ambition, it runs on unconditional love. That line is easy to cheapen and impossible to replace. Love here is not softness, sentiment, romance, or agreeable personality. It is a high coherent state, the only field stable enough to sustain extreme counter-rotation without tearing the structure apart. Fear destabilizes the spin. Hatred distorts the symmetry. Ego collapses the field inward around itself like gravity. Domination poisons the current. Only unconditional love provides the kind of non-fragmented signal that lets the engine run without disintegrating the pilot. So ethics are not decorative. They are aerospace requirements. That is why someone with sharpened mind but closed heart can accumulate occult force and still remain trapped. They may manipulate. They may influence. They may frighten, but they do not cross the void, because the one fuel that survives the crossing is the one state their structure cannot hold. Love is not a moral sermon placed on top of the machine. It is the machine's operating condition. This is why the heart had to awaken first. Without that reactor online, the craft remains dark. Now come to ignition. Most people breathe only to keep tissue alive. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out. The initiate breathes for a second reason, to move prana through the central current of the body and feed the light structure waiting around it. Many teachings describe a pranic tube running vertically through the human form, from above the crown to below the feet, a luminous axis through which energy can be drawn. Merkaba activation begins by working with that axis deliberately. The tetrahedrons are visualized. Breath is synchronized. Energy is drawn in from above and below at the same time. In some schools, it is gathered at the navel. In others, the heart plays the central role. A sphere is then formed around the body through intention and coherent feeling. And finally, the rotation is mentally commanded. At first, yes, much of this resembles disciplined imagination. That is not a weakness. It is the early stage of instruction. Every real instrument must first be learned symbolically before it becomes palpable. With practice, the process stops feeling merely imagined. People describe heat, current in the spine, spatial expansion, the sensation that the room grows charged, that the body becomes lighter, that something larger than skin has turned on. The engine does not roar with noise. It begins with a hum, a charge, a rearrangement of inner space. And once that rearrangement stabilizes, the implications become staggering. Ordinary death means leaving the body and continuing in subtler vehicles, as the night traveler already discovered when sleep was recognized as a temporary rehearsal. The cycle then continues, and consciousness returns again through another birth. Ascension describes something different. It is not escape as a ghost. It is not waiting in a grave for some remote resurrection. It is the possibility that the physical itself can be transmuted by acceleration of its vibratory state until it is no longer visible to a lower register. Not destroyed, shifted, not dead, retuned. This is why traditions speak of Elijah, Enoch, the risen Christ, Mary, Taoist immortals, and rainbow body adepts as those who did not simply die in the normal way. The language varies, but the pattern is consistent. The tomb is empty, the body is absent. The person has not left a corpse behind in the ordinary sense, because matter itself has been carried across by a higher order field. You do not change worlds by dragging the old density through a locked door. You change the density, you change the station, and the lower eye loses sight of what the higher vehicle has taken with it. Even for those not standing at the edge of such an extreme possibility, an active Merkaba is said to have immense consequences here and now. It acts as shield, amplifier, and programmable field. A coherent person inside an active light body no longer leaks energy in all directions. Intention gains precision. Protection becomes easier to establish. Negative influence struggles to penetrate. Manifestation accelerates not but because reality becomes whimsical, but because the signal becomes laser-like instead of scattered. Within such a field, a decree is no longer a weak wish. It is geometrically reinforced transmission. That is why one must be careful what is asked for inside it. The field does not simply magnify noble intentions, it magnifies what is present. Confusion amplified becomes faster confusion. Fear amplified becomes sharper distortion. Coherence amplified becomes power. The machine does not decide who you are, it reveals it quickly. Now widen the frame. The teaching insists that Earth itself possesses a light body, a field architecture of its own, and that human beings are not isolated units, but nodes within a larger planetary geometry. This is where modern esoteric language about the shift, the new Earth, grid activation, and post-2012 transformation enters. Much of that language has been abused, inflated, and trivialized, but beneath the noise there is a serious idea. A person activating their own field in coherence may serve as an anchor point within the wider field of the planet. You do not awaken only for yourself. You stabilize something larger. That gives new meaning to pressure, exhaustion, heat, unusual symptoms, nervous surges, and those periods when it feels as though more voltage is moving through the body than the old wiring can handle. Some of it is ordinary imbalance, yes, and discernment is non-negotiable. But some of it, within this model, can be understood as recalibration, a system being asked to carry more current than its previous identity was built to sustain. You are not always breaking down. Sometimes you are being upgraded against your preferences. Now come to powers, because no chapter on the light body can avoid them. The yogic traditions speak of siddhis, levitation, telepathy, bilocation, healing, unusual command over matter or perception. The immature mind hears these and immediately wants spectacle. The deeper teaching hears something else: side effects. If a counter-rotating field can alter the relationship between body and gravity, then levitation stops being a childish fantasy and becomes an implied consequence. If the field interfaces with a universal mental network, telepathy stops sounding ridiculous. If coherent geometry can reorder distorted geometry in another person, healing through touch becomes thinkable. But again, the safeguard returns. Seek powers for the ego and the field collapses. The desire to be special, feared, admired, superior, or spectacular cuts the fuel supply because it returns consciousness to self-centered gravity. The Merkaba is not built for performance. It is built for freedom and service. Powers may arise. They are not the destination. The destination is liberation from density and participation in a larger order without forgetting love. Anything less turns the vehicle back into an ornament. And this brings us to the great forgetting. Many traditions place the misuse of this technology in a lost age. Lantis, or whatever symbolic name you prefer for a former state of human consciousness that knew more than this age remembers. Whether taken literally or mythically, the lesson is the same. A civilization that knows the machine but lacks purity eventually tries to use it for control, lower astral interference, manipulation, and domination. Then the field collapses. The memory goes dark. Consciousness falls into density. The knowledge survives in fragments, symbols, ruins, scriptures, and myths. But the operating state is lost. That is where humanity stands now. Not ignorant by origin, amnesiac by consequence. Which means this chapter is not handing you an exotic new invention. It is provoking an ancient memory in the system. Your deeper field knows the pattern. Your symbolic body knows it. Your hidden architecture was built for it. What has been missing is not hardware but remembrance, not ability but coherence, not light, but the willingness to remove fear and turn the key. The body is the cocoon, the soul is the butterfly, the Merkaba is the geometry of its wings. And after everything that has been cleared, opened, and remembered, the real question is no longer whether such a vehicle exists. The real question is whether you are willing to remain a creature of the shell when the design of flight has been folded around you all along. Chapter 10. Gnosis, knowledge without books. There is a point on this path where more information becomes a trap. Up to that point, learning feels like growth. You collect terms, systems, correspondences, diagrams, fields, bodies, symbols, geometries, and practices, and the mind becomes excited because it mistakes accumulation for transformation. It says, now I understand, now I know more, now I am advancing. But there comes a moment when all that stored knowledge begins to harden instead of open. And if you do not cross that threshold correctly, you become what the spiritual world produces in disturbing abundance: an informed man with a dry soul. Hermetic teaching draws the line with precision. There are two forms of knowledge. One is acquired. It comes through reading, study, listening, comparison, memory, and intellectual arrangement. It belongs to the mind, and it is useful. It helps you navigate the world of forms, names, methods, distinctions, and sequences. The other form is not acquired in that way at all. It is revealed. It rises from within when the noise drops, when the mind stops performing, when the deeper center opens and something enters all at once. The first is instruction. The second is gnosis. One gives you concepts, the other changes your substance. That is why the Kalama Sutta remains one of the most dangerous teachings ever spoken for any system built on obedience. Believe nothing merely because you heard it. Believe nothing because it is repeated by many. Believe nothing because it is written in books or spoken by authority. Examine, observe, test, live what proves true and beneficial. This is not skepticism for its own sake. It is the refusal to outsource the throne of knowing. And now that refusal becomes necessary. Because, traveler, at this point in the journey you are full. You have touched the invisible library, studied the hidden architecture beneath form, listened to the world as vibration, recognized the layered bodies, relocated intelligence into the heart, approached the crystal receiver, relearned the language of symbol, and stood at the edge of the light body itself. The mind now buzzes with terms: akasha, toroidal field, pineal transduction, star tetrahedron, astral, causal, coherence, Merkaba. And here is the bad news. None of it matters if it does not become blood. You can spend your life studying water. You can memorize its chemistry, map every river, calculate flow, classify minerals, compare oceans, lecture on hydrodynamics, and still die of thirst standing beside a spring. Meanwhile, an illiterate man kneels at the river, drinks, and knows more about water in one swallow than the scholar knows in 10 years of description. You may have the concept, he has the contact. You may have information, he has gnosis. The Greek word itself is often translated too weakly as knowledge, which causes immediate confusion. This is not knowledge in the ordinary sense, not episteme, not accumulated explanation, not catalogued theory. Gnosis is knowledge by direct participation. It is the difference between reading the menu and eating the meal, between analyzing the score and hearing the symphony in your marrow, between studying maps of a country and standing barefoot in its rain. Most seekers never cross into that second mode. They become librarians of transcendence, experts in vocabulary, fluent in Sanskrit, Kabbalah, theology, ritual, correspondences, subtle anatomy, esoteric jargon. Their shelves expand, their egos refine, their speech impresses. Their lives remain small, frightened, reactive, and dry. They can explain awakening beautifully and still panic when death knocks. Still resent the neighbor, still live from fear, still treat the body as if it were separate from the truths they preach. That is not gnosis. That is spiritual declaration. And decoration is not transformation. The trap is subtle because the intellect is not the enemy. It is useful, elegant, necessary. It dissects reality well, but the intellect cannot unite what it cuts. It can name the flower, measure the petals, classify the species, observe the cells, and in doing so destroy the living experience it hoped to understand. Gnosis does the opposite. It does not know about the flower from outside. It enters communion with it. It feels the upward longing of its stem, the pressure of light in its opening, the quiet economy of its form. It knows from within. The intellect stands apart. Gnosis collapses the distance. This is why every real path eventually requires a death of the scholar. First, you must learn. That part matters. The vessel must be built, the terms clarified, the mind sharpened enough not to drown in confusion. But then comes the second movement. Unlearning. Emptying. The stage where books begin to feel dry, lectures repetitive, rituals mechanical, and even beautiful teachings strangely unable to save you from pain, grief, fear, or mortality. That moment terrifies many seekers. They assume they need a more advanced teaching, another guru, a deeper system, a rarer ritual, a more secret map, so they keep shopping for transcendence. They add one more layer to the shelf. The master recognizes something else. The intellect has reached its limit. The raft has done its work. Now the vessel must empty. If your cup is filled with opinions, quotes, systems, and dogmas, even refined spiritual dogmas, nothing living can pour into it. The beginner's mind praised in Zen is not naivete. It is structural openness. It is the honest state of saying, I know much, but I do not know enough to block what is now trying to enter. That humility is not weakness, it is the door. Technically, gnosis occurs when the usual separation between subject and object collapses. Under ordinary perception, there is always a split. I am here, the thing is there. The mind then analyzes the object from outside, measuring, comparing, naming, judging. In Gnosis, resonance rises to the point where the observer and the observed synchronize. The boundary thins. For a moment, you are not listening to the music. You are the music. You are not solving the problem from outside. You are inside the structure of the problem, and because you are inside it, the answer appears from within rather than being forced through linear deduction. This is the mechanics of the flash. The intellect then arrives afterward to translate. Gnosis is the lightning. Thought is the thunder that follows. Great discoveries often work that way. Einstein's famous thought experiments did not begin as dry algebra. He entered an imaginal state. He rode a beam of light. He felt the structure first and only later translated it into mathematics. The mathematics mattered, but it did not come first. The insight was direct. The calculation was the echo. This should already change the role of the teacher. In the early stages, external authority is necessary. Children need guidance. Beginners need method. Students need structure. But if the path is real, dependence on the outer teacher must eventually weaken. Otherwise, the student does not awaken. He merely joins a hierarchy. Gnosis returns authority to its source, not to the ego, to the inner master. Call it the higher self, the indwelling guide, the Satguru in the heart. Names do not matter. The important thing is that there is a layer in you that does not shout, does not flatter, does not panic, and does not need applause. It answers in quiet certainty. It gives not universal slogans, but living instructions calibrated to your actual condition. A book may say fast. The inner master may say eat, because what you need now is grounding, not purification. Scripture may say withdraw. The inner master may say speak. The mature seeker learns the difference between rebellion against authority and obedience to living truth. That is why genuine teachers do not want permanent followers. They want mirrors to become lamps. If you see light in them, it is because that same light already exists in you and is being reflected back until you recognize it as your own. All organized religion begins this way. Moses in the burning bush, Buddha under the tree, Christ in direct union, Muhammad in revelation. A single individual enters direct contact with source. That is the fire. Then the followers build institutions around the memory of that fire. Rules, buildings, titles, systems, hierarchies, approved language, borders of belief. Religion becomes the ash of an encounter once alive. Gnosis is the fire still burning. This is why secondhand faith can never fully satisfy. It may comfort, organize, restrain chaos, and preserve fragments, but it is still ash compared to direct flame. To believe in God because another man saw the bush is not the same as standing before your own bush when reality tears open and presence floods the room so completely that your cells never again confuse opinion with truth. That direct encounter is worth more than 1,000 borrowed prayers, because belief is not the same as knowing. Belief is mental positioning. Knowing is cellular certainty. How does it arrive? Rarely in linear sequence. Gnosis comes as a packet, a download, a total form received in an instant and only later unpacked by the mind. You may be washing dishes, walking alone, sitting in silence, or doing something completely ordinary when suddenly an understanding lands whole. You understand your father, or your illness, or your fear, or why a certain pattern has repeated for 20 years, or why the universe had to be structured this way. The mind did not build the answer piece by piece. The whole entered first. The translation may then take hours, months, even years. Mystics write 500 pages trying to explain what they saw in 1 second. The second came first. The pages came later. This is why such downloads must be treated with respect even when they do not yet fit the old mental operating system. Install first, interpret later. Not every impression is truth, of course. Discernment remains essential. But the modern mind often makes the opposite error. It rejects what arrives whole because it cannot yet justify it in language. That is like refusing a software update because the old machine cannot explain the new code. The control system thrives on that hesitation. Historically, Gnosis has always threatened intermediaries. Institutions depend on distance between the individual and source. The doctor must stand between you and healing. The politician between you and order. The priest between you and salvation. The expert between you and reality. Sometimes these roles are necessary at practical levels. But spiritually, when dependence becomes absolute, the toll is obedience, money, fear, and surrendered authority. The Gnostic breaks the toll gate. He still learns from others, but he no longer kneels before the intermediary as the owner of truth. He tests. He listens. He knows from within. That makes him difficult to control, because he cannot be frightened as easily with hell, bribed as easily with heaven, or managed as easily through official language. This path is not safe for systems built on dependency. It is a declaration of cognitive independence, and the body itself knows when truth arrives. The mind is fickle. Today it believes one argument, tomorrow another book undoes it. It can rationalize for any side if the language is skillful enough. The body is harder to deceive. Gnosis lands semantically, expansion in the chest, heat in the hands, a clean vibration in the solar plexus, a full body resonance like a tuning fork struck at the correct frequency. When something is true for you at the level of the soul, surprise is often not the main reaction. Relief is. Of course, I already knew this. I had forgotten. Truth at that level is remembered, not acquired. This gives you a practical instrument. Use the body as a barometer. If an idea chronically contracts you, freezes you, makes you subtly nauseous, smaller, colder, divided, then whatever its logic, it is not your path right now. If an idea opens the chest, steadies the breath, deepens the spine, and creates an unmistakable sense of inner rightness, that matters. Not as blind emotion, as resonance. Then comes the final simplification. All the techniques in this work, subtle bodies, sacred geometry, coherent heart practice, pineal cleansing, symbolic reading, Merkaba activation, are rafts. Powerful rafts. Necessary rafts. But still rafts. The Buddha's image remains exact. A man builds a raft to cross the river. Once he reaches the far shore, he does not hoist the raft onto his back and carry it through the forest as a permanent burden. He leaves it. If he clings to the tool after the crossing, the tool becomes weight. One day, if the work is real, that same thing happens here. There will come a time when meditation is no longer a scheduled act because your life itself has become a kind of meditation. There will come a time when the Merkaba is no longer something you visualize because light has become your default relation to being. There will come a time when you do not consult the Akasha because your life is already lived in immediate contact with the flow that the idea of Akasha only pointed toward. At the end, Gnosis becomes simple. No performance, no search, no spiritual vanity, just being. The seeker dissolves into the sought. The journey ends where it began, except now the beginning is known from within instead of imagined from outside. And so the audio ends. The room becomes quiet again. But you know now that the quiet is not empty. The air around you is still saturated. The field is still alive. The chair supporting your body rests inside an invisible geometry. The heart in your chest is still broadcasting. The symbol is still speaking. The light body remains folded around you like memory waiting for courage. The silence is no longer absence. It is presence without noise. And if anything in these pages is real, it will not remain as theory in your mind. It will become conduct, field, posture, perception, and life. Otherwise, burn the pages and save yourself the burden. Because the final teaching is mercilessly simple. Do not collect truth. Become permeable enough that truth can live through you. Ending. The 360-degree vision. Across these 10 chapters, we have not been collecting ideas. We have been performing surgery. Layer by layer, we have cut away the cataracts of materialism. The thick film that taught you to identify yourself with flesh, weight, biography, and surface events. The old blindness that made you think you were only a body moving briefly through an indifferent universe before vanishing into silence. I asked you to distrust the tyranny of the visible. I asked you to stop kneeling before solid matter as if it were the final authority. I asked you to begin trusting the invisible, not as superstition, not as fantasy, but as structure, field, frequency, memory, and law. You have seen too much now to return completely to sleep. You have seen that within you there is a light vehicle, a Merkaba, not as mythology but as dormant architecture. That within your skull there is a crystalline organ capable of receiving what ordinary sight cannot register. That within your chest there is a sovereign field, a toroidal heart intelligence stronger than thought, wider than personality, and closer to truth than logic alone will ever be. But all of this hidden technology, all of this sacred engineering, serves one purpose only. And it is not escape. It is not given to make you feel superior. It is not given so you can decorate the ego with mystical language, collect powers, or float above ordinary life with the vanity of someone who thinks they are more awakened than the next person standing in line at a grocery store. It is given so that you may live human life with 360-degree vision. That is the real initiation. To walk with your feet fully on the ground while your awareness remains open to the sky. To pay bills, raise children, answer emails, stand in traffic, cook, clean, grieve, choose, love and endure. But to do all of it no longer as a sleepwalker pushing matter through dead time, rather as a conscious being moving inside a living field, knowing that every gesture carries signal, every thought affects structure, every encounter is energy meeting energy, and every ordinary moment hides a depth that the old eye could never see. Then the world changes without needing to become different. A stranger on the bus is no longer a random body in your peripheral vision. You see another fragment of the same source wearing a different face, carrying an unseen history, fighting battles you cannot measure, trying in their own way to survive the pressure of incarnation. A tree is no longer scenery. It becomes a visible equation of order, breath, ratio, patience, spiral intelligence rising quietly from soil toward light. A problem is no longer only an obstacle, a wall, a punishment, or bad luck. It becomes a lesson in geometry, a distortion seeking reordering, a pressure point where life is forcing your structure toward a higher coherence than the one you were willing to choose voluntarily. This is what the eye of the soul does. It does not remove you from life. It returns life to its true density. And in doing so, it eliminates boredom at the root. How could boredom survive in a universe where every atom is vibrating, every field is speaking, every dream is coded, every symptom has symbolic intelligence, every coincidence may be a line of text from a deeper order, and every silence is full instead of empty? Boredom was never caused by a lack of events. It was caused by a lack of perception. The same is true of death. How could you fear it in the old way once you have understood that the biological body is a suit, a layer, a temporary interface, and not the owner of the consciousness wearing it? Fear may still visit the nerves, the animal system may still tremble before pain or separation, but the deeper terror begins to lose authority. You no longer imagine yourself as a bag of chemistry doomed to extinction. You begin to recognize yourself as the one who has always been driving, the one who has worn many forms, the one who leaves and returns, the one who can step in and out of vehicles while remaining itself. But now the burden shifts. The responsibility is yours. Do not place this knowledge in the attic of the intellect beside other fascinating ideas and curiosities. Do not turn it into conversational ornament. Do not make it another shelf in the museum of your mind. Use it. Embody it. Let it change your Clean the lens, strengthen the heart field, listen to the subtle signal before the collective panic reaches you. Become a seeing person in a culture trained to glorify blindness. But keep the final correction close, because this path can still be corrupted if the ego reaches for the wrong proof. The true seer is not the one who boasts about seeing auras, predicting outcomes, reading energies, or speaking in riddles to impress the uncertain. The true seer is recognized somewhere else entirely. It is the one who, precisely because they see more, become less violent, less arrogant, less cruel, more exact in kindness, more radical in compassion, more incapable of dehumanizing another being, because once unity has been seen even for a second, harm no longer feels abstract. To wound another becomes a form of self-mutilation. To lie becomes distortion in your own field. To hate becomes self-poison. The final proof that the eye of the soul has opened is not power. It is love without bargaining. It is the kind of love that does not need performance, superiority, or spiritual identity, because it arises directly from perception. When you truly see the same source moving through everyone, kindness is no longer morality. It is accuracy, and the world desperately needs that accuracy now. Humanity is wandering inside a nightmare of separation, reduction, fear, materialism, overstimulation, and forgetting. People have been taught to fear what cannot be bought, to dismiss what cannot be weighed, to doubt what cannot be packaged by an institution. And so they live sealed inside the narrow room we began with, arguing over shadows while the greater light waits outside and within them at once. What is needed are not more sleepers with better opinions. What is needed are lighthouses, conscious observers, men and women whose perception is coherent enough that their very presence begins to reorder the field around them, who do not merely complain about chaos but collapse possibility toward peace, who do not merely diagnose sickness but radiate health, who do not merely condemn fear but carry enough inner order that others begin to remember freedom in their vicinity. That can be you, not as fantasy, as practice, as embodiment, as choice repeated until it becomes nature. Your gaze is not passive. It participates. It selects, strengthens, and feeds realities. The field responds to the quality of the observer. Your heart broadcasts. Your symbols arrange themselves accordingly. Your body obeys the patterns you keep rehearsing. Your life becomes, more and more, an echo of what you are willing to perceive as true. So now the teaching closes where the real work begins. The room is quiet again. But this silence is no longer empty to you. You know the air is saturated. You know the walls are resting inside invisible geometry. You know the heart in your chest is still radiating beyond your ribs. You know that consciousness is larger than thought, larger than flesh, larger than fear. You know that what looks ordinary is only ordinary to eyes that have not yet learned how to see. Now choose. Not once, but daily. Choose what kind of field you will strengthen. Choose what kind of symbols you will obey. Choose whether your gaze will continue collapsing reality into fear, hardness, and separation, or into peace, health, coherence, and freedom. If something in you shifted, don't ignore it. This is Book Sounds Better You, where you don't just listen, you start to see. Subscribe, stay with us, and go deeper in the next video.